Chapter 732. This matter was indeed very sad. A series of promotion and contrast, in the end, showed Lin Sun's divine power and brilliant achievements, which almost drove Ng K crazy. Some strong voodoo barbarians nearby also looked terrible. They were so angry that they had nowhere to vent their anger. They even looked at Lu Wen with a touch of resentment. There was nothing he could do about it. He was the only human here. Lu Wen's face was livid. He felt uncomfortable all over, as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He was also extremely aggrieved. He hated Lin Sun for a long time and wished that Lin Sun could be killed as soon as possible, but the reality was so cruel. What annoyed him most was that these voodoo barbarians hated him for no reason. Was it true that those who were not of the same tribe must have different intentions? Anyway, this time Lin Sun appeared alive and reversed the situation with his brilliant achievements. In the end, the voodoo barbarian tribe's morale was hit hard. Many strong voodoo barbarians were anxious. Lin Shi was still alive. This was not only a blow to the morale, but also a similar tragic thing might happen in the future. Sure enough, their worries came true. On the same day, an imperial practitioner spoke on behalf of Lin Sun. Child Lin said, "Let the half-step king barbarians among you barbarians wash your necks and wait." A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Those strong voodoo barbarians were all stunned. This guy still wanted to continue killing? And those half-step king barbarians were even more shocked and angry. Lin Sun was threatening them. He was absolutely lawless. But they had no choice but to be afraid. Too many half-step king barbarians had died in Lin Sun's hands. It might be a fluke if it happened once, but if it happened many times there would be no fluke at all. Even the 3 barbarian kings, King Yanqiong, King Jinpe, and King Lei Xiao, were so angry and livid when they heard the news. A young man of Tao Insight realm dared to be so arrogant in the mulberry forest. Did he really think these old guys were just decorations? Child Lin, good job. What do you mean by swallowing thousands of miles like a tiger? That's it. God has eyes. It's absolutely a blessing for our empire to have such a talent like Child Lin. The imperial practitioners were completely stirred, and their admiration for Lin Sun had reached an unprecedented level. A young man of Tao Insight realm killed half-step king barbarians as if he was drinking tea. Who could not be convinced, amazed, and admired him? On the same day, even Lin Sun, who was searching for strange jades in the mulberry forest, heard the news. But he didn't expect that it would be so noisy, which was totally beyond his expectation and imagination. Lin Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry on the way. Some strong voodoo barbarians he met on the way fled in panic with pale faces like frightened birds before Lin Sun could take action. Some practitioners of the empire he met stepped forward to greet him warmly. Their eyes lit up, which made Lin uncomfortable. When they learned that Lin Sun was looking for some strange jades, these practitioners were even more generous and gave some of the strange jades they had collected these days to Lin Sun. How could Lin Sun accept a reward without doing anything? But he couldn't stand the enthusiasm of the other party, who seemed to look down on him if he didn't accept it. In the end, Lin Sun could only accept this kindness. In just 2 days, Lin Sun had unknowingly obtained a full bag of strange jades, at least 500 or 600 of them. Lin Sun couldn't help but click his tongue. This speed was much faster than exploring by himself. Originally, Lin Sun was still a little vigilant and alert. After all, he made too much noise this time. Although the 3 half-step king barbarians of Wood Spirit Peak didn't die in his hands, no one would believe that he didn't do it even if he explained it now. In addition, he had said that he would continue to kill the half-step king barbarians of Voodoo Barbarian tribe, so he had already become the focus of attention. At this time, Lin Sun didn't doubt that Voodoo Barbarian tribe could bear such a big loss. In other words, the enemy would never give up. Therefore, in the next action, Lin Sun had been highly vigilant. He even speculated that the king of voodoo barbarian tribe might not be able to bear it and attack him. But soon, something happened suddenly, which helped Lin Sun resolve all the potential threat. On this day, in a ruin in the depths of the mulberry forest, there suddenly appeared a shocking phenomenon. Mysterious cyan clouds condensed into flowers and fell from the sky. That scene was no different from the legendary heavenly flower shower. At the same time, a mysterious Taoist palace appeared in that area. Just the stairs alone had 9,999 steps. It was like a stairway to heaven. The Taoist palace was towering and majestic, standing between heaven and earth, exuding a magnificent and boundless sacred aura, which dyed the world with a layer of magnificent and brilliant aura. This was undoubtedly the descent of a great fortuitous encounter. All of a sudden, both the Empire and the voodoo barbarian tribe were stirred. All the top figures were alarmed and rushed over there with all their strength. At this time, it was impossible for those big figures to pay attention to Lin Sun anymore. But in this way, Lin Sun was much more relaxed. After thinking about it, he finally decided to leave this mulberry forest. He had collected enough strange jades and accomplished the purpose of this trip. He was sure that the broken blade could undergo a transformation. As for the mysterious Taoist palace that suddenly appeared, although Lin Sun was curious, he was very calm. He knew that it was no different from courting death to go there with his own ability. Perhaps he could kill a half-step king, but he could only rely on the power of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, which could only be used once at most. It was impossible for him to fight for a long time. At a time like this, competing for the fortuitous encounters with those true kings would definitely be courting death. Moreover, Lin Sun had a hunch that those horrible creatures lurking in various areas of the mulberry forest would certainly not be willing to be lonely. Sure enough, on the way Lin Sun retreated, he heard a cicada chirping. Then, a horrible sacred aura swept out and rushed to the depths of the mulberry forest. At the same time, a bloody light appeared in another area. A bloody moth wrapped in a void storm, like a black hole that swallowed everything, also started to move. Boom! What made Lin Sun's scalp numb was that in the area where he killed Ting Hai, the half-step king of Qi, a huge green dragon with a length of thousands of meters rushed out of the air. It was suffused with sacred breath and roared, breaking the void and leaving. Obviously, the cyan dragon was the horrible creature lurking in the depths of the underground cave. Even the horrible creatures who have stepped into the divine path have come out. What kind of shocking secret is hidden in the Taoist palace? Lin Sun was shocked. But all this also strengthened his mind to leave the mulberry forest. An unpredictable bloody storm was bound to take place near the Taoist palace. Even the kings of the Empire and the voodoo barbarian tribe would face the danger of death. Lin Sun didn't want to stay in this damn place any longer. Although the opportunity was great, if he didn't have the ability to seize it, he would only be cannon fodder. One day later, Lin Sun returned to the edge of the entrance of the mulberry forest without any danger. When he arrived here, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It was too dangerous along the way. Many horrible creatures appeared along the way. Although there was no existence at the divine level, there was no lack of monsters at the king level. Like a broken bronze spear, it seemed to have intelligence and released a dim, sacred aura. Obviously, it was a broken divine weapon, but its power was more fierce than that of a real king. There was also a strange golden flower. As the petals fluttered, golden lights flew like sword rain, tearing the void. Obviously, it was also a king realm existence. In addition, there were many strange and unknown creatures, which seemed to wake up from silence and rush to the depths of the mulberry forest. Lin Sun had seen with his own eyes that almost all the escaping strongmen, whether they were from the Empire or the voodoo barbarian tribe, were killed by these horrible creatures simply and rudely. This was the mulberry forest with the title of Devil Soil Stained with Divine Blood. It was at this time that Lin Sun finally realized the horror here. Compared with places such as Burial of Tao Sea and Ultimate in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, it was not inferior at all. Fortunately, I didn't go to the mysterious Taoist palace this time, otherwise. Lin soon felt a chill in his heart just thinking about it. Without hesitation, he rushed out of the mulberry forest. On the way, there were also many imperial practitioners and voodoo barbarians fleeing. Like Lin Sun, they sensed the danger and didn't dare to stay any longer in order to save their lives. What? Soon after he left the mulberry forest, Lin Sun sensed a familiar figure in his soul. Lu Wen. This guy was fleeing with a group of strong voodoo barbarians in a hurry. Immediately, Lin Sun noticed Ing Ke, the young master of the dark barbarian tribe among the group of strong voodoo barbarians. Ho ho, it's a small world. Lin Sun's lips curled into a cold arc, and he followed up without a trace. I don't want to give up. This time, we not only failed to kill Lin Shi, but also didn't have a chance to intervene when the opportunity appeared. With a gloomy face, Ing Ke and his group were flying forward. At this time, both the imperial practitioners and the voodoo barbarians were fleeing. No one was in the mood to fight with them, which made them less fetters and obstacles. Young lord, don't be discouraged. Where there's life, there's hope. With your current foundation, sooner or later, you can set foot on the path of Taoism. Lu Wen hurriedly comforted him. What I hate is that not only did this operation come to nothing, but it also made Lin Shi famous again. That damned little bastard, if he did not have the help of that mysterious Bao, how could he possibly possess such heaven-defying strength? At the mention of Lin Sun, Ing Ke was so angry that he gnashed his teeth and his eyes almost popped out. Lu Wen also cursed with resentment. Young lord, people like Lin Shi are destined to suffer. He shows off too much. As the saying goes, the taller the tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. The more dazzling he is now, the more miserable he will die when he suffers the disaster. Really? At this moment, an indifferent and low voice suddenly sounded, which made Lu Wen stiff all over and almost scared out of his wits. This voice, he was so familiar with it. Chapter 733. Lin Shi. Lu Wen was stunned as if he was struck by lightning. He didn't expect that he would suddenly meet Lin Sun when he just escaped from Mulberry Woods. Young lord, be careful! Lu Wen roared. At this time, his first reaction was to warn Ing Quebec. He had to admit that this guy did have the potential to be a traitor. Puff! But when Lu Wen's voice sounded, he saw a bloody hole suddenly appeared in the throat of Ing Ke beside him. Ing Ke was obviously not prepared at all. He still looked shocked. It was hard for him to imagine that he would be killed so abruptly even at the moment of his death. He was the young lord of the dark barbarian tribe. He was a born assassin who walked in the shadows and made all the practitioners of the empire change their faces. But now, he had been killed without even noticing it at all. Clatter! A stream of scarlet blood burst out from Ing Ke's throat and sprinkled on Lu Wen's face. He was so shocked that he couldn't help screaming and his soul almost left his body. Dead? Lu Wen didn't feel good at all. His heart was overwhelmed by fear. Ing Ke, the young lord of the dark barbarian tribe, was a top figure in the young generation of the voodoo barbarian camp. Many old monsters thought highly of him, and thought that he was very likely to become a barbarian emperor who set foot on the path of cultivation in the future. But now Ing Ke was dead. Lu Wen was not mourning for him, but he had pinned all his hopes on Ing Ke and hoped to stand firm in the voodoo barbarian tribe with Ing Ke's appreciation in the future. But now all his hopes were shattered. Lu Wen felt that the sky had collapsed. He was stunned because of panic and confusion. Fierce fighting sounds, shrill screams, and terrible collisions came to his ears, but Lu Wen looked dull and lost. His hope was gone. As a traitor, he could no longer return to the camp of the Empire. With Ing Ke's death, there was no place for him in the voodoo barbarian tribe. Lu Wen felt an indescribable despair. Do you want to kill yourself, or let me do it? Lin Sun's voice rang in Lu Wen's ears like a thunderclap, waking him up from the endless despair. He looked around and saw corpses of voodoo barbarians on the ground. Lin Sun was standing there, looking at him quietly. In the distance, some imperial practitioners were watching and whispering to each other. Their faces were filled with disdain and loathing. "It's over." The last string in Lu Wen's heart snapped, and his mind went blank. "I hate him so much. If it weren't for you, how could I have betrayed the Empire? How could I have fallen to such a state today?" Lu Wen seemed to have completely gone mad. His expression was distorted as he roared. With bloodshot eyes, he stared at Lin Sun fiercely as if he wanted to eat him alive. "It's all your fault. It's your fault." As he roared, he charged forward with a saber in hand. Puff! Before it could even approach, Lu Wen's neck was severed by the broken blade, and a bloody head flew into the air. Even at the moment of his death, he still had a sinister and resentful expression. Lin Sun turned around and left without looking back. Lu Wen didn't feel any remorse even when he died. Instead, he blamed all the mistakes on Lin Sun. His death was not worth pitying. Before leaving, Lin Sun looked back at the mulberry forest behind him, which was shrouded in blood mist, mysterious and unknown. But Lin Sun knew clearly that in the depths of the mulberry forest, a bloody storm was unfolding around a mysterious Taoist palace that had emerged. "There are saints lurking here with too many secrets. Maybe one day I can come back and explore it." Inexplicably, Lin Sun thought of the solemn golden cicada and its almost absurd wish. He hoped that one day all the creatures in the world could become saints. In the evening, before the night fell, Lin Sun finally returned to Camp 7. "You didn't die?" Hearing the news, Lu Wenning jumped out like an old rabbit with excitement on his face. These days, he almost spent in fear and trepidation, fearing that some bad news about Lin Sun would come. Now, seeing Lin Sun return safely, he undoubtedly let out a long sigh of relief. Immediately after, Lu Wenting started to grumble and complain. "You're too willful, leaving just like that. Don't you know how dangerous it is? Do you know how serious the consequences will be if something happens to you? Do you know?" Lin Sun felt a headache. When he was about to find a chance to return to his room, a thunderous roar sounded. "How dare you come back?" General Sun Lai also came after hearing the news. With a face full of anger, he scolded Lin Sun in a voice so loud that the whole camp could hear him. Lin Sun also knew that his action made them very worried. Knowing that he was in the wrong, he could only stand there obediently and accept the scolding. If the top figures in the mulberry forest saw this, their jaws would drop. Who could imagine that Lin Shi, who was as strong as a young devil, could be so obedient and docile? Zhang Sunlai let Lin Sun go after venting his anger. But before leaving, he warned Lin Sun that if Lin Sun dared to act alone again, he would never spare him. It was not until the night fell that Lin finally returned to his room. Clang! Lin Sun opened his luggage. All kinds of ores and spiritual materials poured out like running water, piling up on the ground. Except for some high-rank spiritual crystals that originally belonged to him, the rest were all trophies obtained in the mulberry forest. Among them, there were rare spiritual materials, mysterious ores of unknown use, broken iron pieces, blood-stained fur and so on. The largest number was the mysterious jade, with 500 or 600 pieces. Lin Sun sorted out the fifth-grade treasures and stored them in different categories. Although some of them could not be used for the time being, their value was immeasurable. There would be a time when they could be of use in the future. Finally, he took out the broken blade and inserted it into the pile of mysterious jade. It should be enough for the broken blade to be completely repaired and transformed. Staring at the broken blade that began to absorb the mysterious vitality, Lin Sun couldn't help showing a touch of expectation in his eyes. Whoosh! Before long, Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the bed and began to meditate. This time in the mulberry forest, it was a blessing in disguise. after meditating on the ice tree for a whole night, his cultivation also leaped into the mastery of Tao Insight realm. Moreover, this sort of breakthrough wasn't just reflected in one's cultivation, even the strength of one's soul had undergone a tremendous change. Now Lin Sun had the time to experience this change. In the sea of his consciousness, meditating magic was running. In an instant, an ice moon emerged, and thousands of spiritual stars were also lit up, surrounding the full moon, sprinkling clear divine light. Different from the past, all these visions were soon submerged by a blazing light. It was a dazzling sun, rising slowly over the sea of his consciousness, shining brilliantly and becoming the only master in the sea of his consciousness. Boom! Lin Sun's soul suddenly trembled violently. Then, as if a layer of shackles covering his soul had been broken, he had a feeling that he was about to fly away from his shell. In a trance, Lin Sun seemed to come to the sky, flying higher and higher. The whole Camp 7 was reflected in his mind. The guards guarding the camp, the practitioners drinking and having fun in the tavern, Lu Wenting who was busy in the munitions office, and the clanking sounds of the ordnance office. All kinds of pictures and sounds emerged in Lin Sun's mind like a huge tide. The gray haze in the sky, the bloody airflow in the void, and the slightest change of each practitioner's expression were also seen by Lin Sun. What? When Lin Sun looked at the place where Zhang Sunlai lived in the distance, he only saw a beam of divine light rising straight to the sky, vigorous and chilling, like billowing smoke, terrifying and boundless. Everything there could not be perceived at all, and it also made Lin Sun feel a kind of unprecedented oppression and fear. Was this the power of the life-death realm? He couldn't be detected or spied on. Whoosh! The next moment, Lin Sun withdrew his spiritual power and returned to his body. Almost at the same time, in Zhang Sunlai's room in the distance, there was a slight sound of surprise. That boy's spiritual power is so strong. Has he condensed his primordial spirit? He suddenly got up, with an unpredictable luster surging in his eyes. It's true! This little monster has done it one step ahead of time. It's really against the natural order. Sun Glory, the third realm of meditating magic. In the room, Lin Sun was enlightened. Moreover, his spiritual power has condensed a primordial spirit. What I just saw is the magical effect of the consciousness of the primordial spirit. This is the spiritual awareness. Only practitioners who have condensed a primordial spirit can possess such power. At this stage, they can already use their divine sense to fight. As long as the primordial spirit is not destroyed, it will not be killed. But, thinking of this, Lin Sun was in a trance. Only practitioners in the reincarnation developing realm could master the power of primordial spirit and spiritual awareness, but now he had mastered them in advance. Spiritual power, related to a practitioner's understanding and wisdom, was the most amazing and incredible. The stronger the spiritual power, the greater the benefits in cultivation. This was a well-known fact in the cultivation world. Once a practitioner had the primordial spirit, he could have the mysterious means of multitasking, commanding the spirit to kill the enemy, deducing good or bad luck, and so on. The full mastery of Tao Insight realm, the spiritual power condensed the primordial spirit, and the cultivation of martial arts and enlightenment. Lin Sun meditated while meditating. What he pursued was the most powerful and complete Tao. Therefore, when his cultivation reached the full mastery of Tao Insight realm, he had to start to consider the preparation for breaking through to the reincarnation developing realm. Breaking through the realm might not be too troublesome for Lin Sun, but if he wanted to continue on his peerless path, he must temper all his strength to the full mastery before breaking through the realm. At that time, it was the real full mastery. The next morning, Lin Sun, who was meditating, was awakened by a sudden sound of saber. He looked up and couldn't help showing a touch of surprise in his eyes. Chapter 734. As early as a few days ago, but the news that came back this morning seemed to be very unusual. The 12th child Lin killed 4 half-step king beings with his bow and shocked the enemies. He showed the power of our empire. Inke, the young master of the dark barbarian royal family, was killed by the 12th child Lin, and the traitor Lu Wen was executed. In the Battle of the Mulberry Forest, Child Lin rose strongly in the killing. He carried out bloody killings with the means of a demon, which made the strong barbarians tremble with fear. News after news about Lin Sun's military exploits fell in Camp 7 like snowflakes, which immediately caused a sensation among all practitioners. Child Lin is really a god. Huang, the guard leader stationed in the camp, patted his thigh excitedly, and his face lit up. This boy. I was worried about him. Who would have thought that he was so fierce? In the quartermaster office, Lu Wenting, who was dealing with official business, was so shocked that he almost jumped up, and then he was overjoyed and in a good mood. Today, practitioners who came to the quartermaster office to exchange military exploits were surprised to find that Lu Wenting, who had always been serious, was extremely enthusiastic and kind. Every time he saw a practitioner, he smiled and said, "Oh, I must go to have a drink with Child Lin tonight. As a friend, I have to celebrate for him." Often at this time, he would attract a burst of envious eyes. It was an honor to have a drink with Lin Sun, not to mention to be friends with the 12th child Lin. Not only does Master Lin have great attainments in spiritual tattoos, but he is also a peerless talent in martial arts cultivation. In the ordnance office, a group of spiritual tattooists were in high spirits, excited and proud. Even Master Ing nodded frequently, stroking his beard. Lu Wen became a traitor. Hu Tong, the head of Star Frost mercenary group, had mixed feelings. He never thought that Lu Wen, who was confirmed dead by him, was not only alive, but also betrayed the empire and turned to the barbarian bastards. Such a person should be cut into pieces and die miserably. A Bai next to him said with hatred and disgust, "I can only say that Child Lin killed him well." In the end, she thought of Lin Sun's brilliant military exploits in the mulberry forest today, and an indescribable feeling welled up in her heart. This young man, whom she had once regarded as a pretty boy, was actually a heaven-defying heaven's favorite. To think that she had even declared that she would protect him. In the tavern, on the street, and among the practitioners in groups of 3 or 5, they were all talking about Lin Sun's dazzling performance this time, which made them admire and marvel. After all, a Grotto Heaven Realm youngster was able to kill so many half-step kings in succession after appearing in the bloodthirsty battlefield. This was simply too inconceivable. Boom! The table in front of Zhang Sunlai was once again smashed into pieces. At this moment, he had a strange expression on his face as he muttered, "Where did that old bastard bloodthirsty king find such a monster? He's simply amazing. I've seen all sorts of geniuses in my life, but I've never seen anyone as heaven-defying as this kid." Outside the door, the corner of the guard's mouth twitched fiercely when he heard the sound of the table shattering. He felt a headache. Recently, because of Lin Shi, the general had smashed several tables. Now he had to replace them with new ones. It seems that it's time to prepare more tables for future use. The guard decided to prepare for a rainy day, because he felt that as long as Lin Sun was still in Camp 7, similar things would definitely continue to happen. It was absolutely right to prepare more tables. Not only in Camp 7, but also in other camps of the Empire. When the news about Lin Sun came out, it set off countless uproars and discussions like a bombshell. Young child Lin Shi is a peerless talent. This was the unanimous evaluation of most practitioners. In the room, Lin Sun's eyes were firmly attracted. The broken blade was floating in the air in the light, and the ground was piled up with broken jade powder. The broken blade had metamorphosed. Its pitch-black blade became as white as snow, almost transparent, as if it was made of mutton-fat jade. Strands of dazzling starlight coiled around it like a dream, and it caused the broken blade to emanate an unprecedented imposing aura. It was no longer as fierce and frightening as before. Instead, it had a kind of holy aura, shining with mysterious and obscure fluctuations. Lin Sun was amazed at this moment. It was too illusory and brilliant, like a masterpiece of God. Clang! Lin Sun held it in his hand like picking up a feather. It was as light as a feather. The blade shed starlight like rain, illuminating the dark room and giving it a holy aura. Lin Sun's eyes fell on the surface of the blade, where there were dense and clear Taoist lines emerging inside the nearly transparent broken blade. Just a glance at it made Lin Sun's mind tremble. He felt a kind of vast, mysterious, and boundless aura. This was a change that had never happened before. Lin Sun couldn't help but send out a wisp of his spiritual awareness to perceive the mysterious Taoist lines. Whoosh! Something strange happened suddenly. The broken blade disappeared out of thin air. At the same time, Lin Sun's sea of consciousness shook and turned upside down as if something strange had been stuffed into it. Suddenly, Lin Sun was shocked to find that the broken blade had appeared in his sea of consciousness. It was as white as snow and almost transparent, sprinkling wisps of starlight like a dream. When Lin Sun ran the power of his spirit, in an instant, there was a wonderful echo with the broken blade in his sea of consciousness. It seemed that the broken blade had turned into a part of his body and become the guardian of his spirit. It felt like blood melted into water. Moreover, the broken blade imperceptibly received a type of nourishment from the primordial spirit. It let out a joyful cry and danced around the primordial spirit endlessly. Whoosh! Lin Sun's mind moved, and the broken blade suddenly swept out. At that moment it was like a dazzling white lightning tearing the void. The sound of the blade was so impassioned that all the furnishings in the room were smashed into powder. Lin Sun took a breath of cold air. What a strong power! Whoosh! The next moment, the broken blade flew in the void according to Lin Sun's mind. Like a nimble fish, it flashed and danced in the narrow room with wisps of starlight like its tail. Clatter! The power released by the broken blade made the void fluctuate violently like a tide, making a deafening sound. The entire house began to shake violently. Seeing this, Lin Sun was shocked. With a thought, the broken blade suddenly turned into a wisp of white light and disappeared in his sea of consciousness. The room became quiet, but Lin Sun couldn't calm down for a long time. He was quite excited. Only now did he suddenly realize that he had used the broken blade wrongly in the past. This treasure could completely be called a true, divine weapon. What was a magic weapon? It was a treasure controlled by spirit. Just like the legendary sword god in ancient times, a flying sword could kill ghosts and gods, break the universe, and disturb yin and yang. In short, it was a treasure that could be controlled by spiritual awareness. It could be called a magic weapon. This spirit was the name of the spirit. Such a treasure was extremely rare in the current world. It was too rare. Even the old monsters of the life and death realm might not possess it. As a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos, Lin Sun knew that the reason why the magic weapon was rare was that the spiritual materials needed to refine it were so rare that they could only be found by chance. Although Lin Sun had obtained all kinds of strange and precious spiritual materials since he started his cultivation, he had never encountered a spiritual material that could be used to refine a magic weapon. This kind of spiritual material was often called magic material by spiritual tattooists. Whoosh! Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun suppressed his excitement and began to meditate quietly, visualizing the broken blade floating in his sea of consciousness. After the transformation of the broken blade, the vague Tao lines on its surface became clear, which looked very magical. Boom! As soon as Lin Sun sensed the mysterious Tao lines with his spiritual awareness, his whole soul seemed to suffer a terrible impact and felt torn. He couldn't help groaning and his spirit throbbed. Sunshine! Lin Sun ran the meditating magic without hesitation. In his sea of consciousness, a great sun rose up and shone brightly, brilliant and magnificent. Suddenly, the throbbing spirit stabilized again, which made Lin soon feel a lingering fear. Even the top practitioners of reincarnation developing realm might not be able to bear the impact just now. If it weren't for the magical effect of the meditating magic, Lin soon suspected that his spirit would collapse completely. Immediately, Lin soon had no time to think about it. His mind was attracted by a simple formation map. It was the formation map reflected by the mysterious Tao lines on the surface of the broken blade. It was ancient and vast, and outlined a word Yuan. Every stroke was like the trace of the Great Way, branded with the mysterious breath of the Great Way, with a kind of unpredictable power that made people's souls want to sink into it. Boom! When Lin soon tried to perceive it, a stream of inheritance power, like a vast ocean, rumbled into Lin soon's spirit. This was a kind of inheritance from the mysterious Tao lines on the broken blade. In an instant, Lin soon had a lot of incredible insights, which were clearly imprinted in his mind, as if he had been enlightened. It turns out that the inheritance left by the Tao lines is about the method of using the broken blade. After a long time, Lin Sun was completely enlightened, and his heart was suddenly enlightened. This caused him to be visibly moved. The broken blade actually had a secret technique that complemented it. This was simply too inconceivable. Lin soon knew that it was too difficult to get this inheritance. If it hadn't been for the transformation of the broken blade, he would not have had the opportunity to unveil the mysterious veil of the broken blade. Similarly, if it hadn't been for his powerful soul power, condensing the spirit, and the meditating magic, he would not have been able to get this inheritance. After a long time, Lin Sun calmed down completely. Suddenly, he noticed that there were 3 mysterious formation maps near the Yuan Tao lines. However, they were too vague and almost invisible. They could only be noticed, but the mystery in them could not be sensed at all. It seems that the inheritance of the broken blade is divided into 4 parts. Now I have only mastered the first secret method of using the broken blade. If I want to get the second secret method, I have to wait until the broken blade transforms for the second time. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Chapter 735. Bloody Storm and Rumors of a Bloody Storm. Next chapter. In the evening, in an area dozens of miles away from Camp 7. Swish, a bright light swept out, dragging a bright tail of starlight, and suddenly cut on a mountain not far away. Boom! Like a knife cutting tofu, the mountain was easily cut in half, and the cut was smooth. That wasn't the end of it. The snow-white, translucent, and almost transparent broken blade flickered incessantly, slashing, slicing, and stabbing. Everywhere it passed, it tore open a series of terrifying cracks in space. Then, there was a loud rumbling sound. The mountain peak, which was dozens of feet high, was cut into neat and tidy chunks of boulders, and then rolled down. Swish! At this time, the broken blade had already flown back and floated in front of Lin Sun. It was as bright as jade, crystal clear, overflowing with holy starlight, without a trace of damage. Lin Sun stood there and pondered quietly. The so-called spirit control skill was not complicated. It was a way to use the divine awareness as a means to control the magic weapon. Spirit, one's own cultivation, and the magic weapon formed a complementary relationship. The stronger one's cultivation was, the more terrifying the power of the magic weapon would be. The stronger the power of the spirit, the more delicate and handy the control of the magic weapon would be. At the same time, the power of the divine weapon itself could allow one's cultivation and the control of the primordial spirit to be maximized. However, while it sounded easy, it was actually rather difficult to cultivate. Duan Ren's Yuan Dao pattern formation diagram contained extremely complicated secrets, and if one wanted to completely master it, one had to practice it continuously. Based on the power of the broken blade alone, it is more than twice as powerful as before. Furthermore, with the mind control technique, its power has increased by a large margin. Based on this, I can easily kill a great reincarnation developing realm cultivator. Unlike insignificance Bao, the broken blade doesn't consume much power. As long as I don't meet a half-step king, it's enough for me to fight for a long time. Lin Sun made a comparison in his mind. In the following time, Lin Sun continued to practice the method of spirit control. The progress was very smooth and the results were gratifying. At the same time, one barren mountain after another collapsed with deafening noises. Very quickly, the Xiozha of Camp 7 were alarmed and came to watch. At the beginning, these practitioners were very surprised, because in their impression, Lin Sun's best fighting method was archery. Moreover, everyone in the bloodthirsty battlefield knew that young Master Lin's archery skills were unparalleled. Therefore, when they saw that Lin Sun was not practicing archery, these practitioners were so shocked. But very quickly they were curious. Apart from archery, what about young Master Lin's other combat skills? Then, when they saw Lin Sun manipulate the broken blade to destroy the barren mountains one after another and raze the area to the ground, these practitioners were all stunned, and their state of mind changed from curiosity to shock. It was really hard for them to imagine that such a young man in the Tao Insight realm was not only heaven-defying in archery, but also so amazing in other combat methods. Could young Master Lin be the legendary Heavenly Son? He's too strong. The hearts of many Xiozha wavered. I'm afraid I can't withstand one blow from young Master Lin if I fight with an enemy. Yan Feng also came. He stared at Lin Sun for a while, and his expression became extremely solemn and his eyes were in a trance. As a famous top practitioner in the reincarnation developing realm in Camp 7, Yan Feng's words immediately caused an uproar among the nearby Xiozha. Spirit control. The broken blade in his hand is a magic weapon. In the depths of the camp, Zhang Sun Lai's eyes flashed with terrifying lightning. A bow and a broken blade are both so powerful. Does this guy have great luck? Lin Sun didn't return to the camp with a tired face until the night fell. However, compared to this, his heart was filled with joy and satisfaction. The Void Dao Mark's method of controlling the soul could be said to be miraculous and unfathomable, and it allowed the broken blade to display such formidable might that even he was surprised. Greetings, young Master Lin. Grandmaster Lin, when are you going to kill the voodoo barbarian bastards again? I'm willing to follow you and charge into battle with you. Young Master Lin, are you free tonight? Can I have a drink with you? On the way back to the camp, all the Xiozha greeted Lin Sun warmly, with admiration in their eyes. Lin Sun returned the greetings with a smile and declined some invitations. Now he was obsessed with practicing martial arts and had no time to entertain people. As the night fell, the camp was brightly lit. However, this night was destined to be turbulent. Soon, an imperial spy rushed into the camp in the dark and hurried to the room of General Zhang Sun Lai. What? General Xiahou Jie is dead? Zhang Sun Lai's angry voice sounded in the room. At the same time, with a bang, the table in front of him turned into sawdust and flew in the air. What the hell is going on? Zhang Sun Lai suppressed his inner shock and asked in a low voice. Finally, after knowing everything, Zhang Sun Lai's face was livid and gloomy. He fell into complete silence without saying a word. The next morning, the whole Camp 7 was in shock. All the Xiozha of the Empire were anxious and the atmosphere was solemn and dead silent. Last night, the latest news from the mulberry forest was like a bolt from the blue, making all the Xiozha of the Empire fall into shock and panic. General Xiahou Jie, the life-death realm king of the Empire, was dead. This was absolutely a big event, like a storm, which was hard to accept. A king was the top power in a camp. Like a stabilizing needle, it was so powerful that the enemy dared not to invade the camp. Now, a king died, which was like a corner of the sky falling down. No one could stay calm. It was said that a mysterious Taoist palace had appeared in the mulberry forest, and that it hid a great opportunity. It attracted many terrifying creatures that were hibernating in the mulberry forest to fight for it, and General Xiahou Jie was killed in the midst of this struggle. It's terrible. I heard that the murderer was a cyan flood dragon that had stepped into the divine path. It took General Xiahou Jie's life just by waving its claws. There is more than one horrible creature that has stepped into the divine path. It is said that almost all the Xiozhia and voodoo barbarians who got close to the mysterious Taoist palace were killed there. How hateful! The news could not be hidden at all. Even Lin Sun, who was obsessed with practicing the imperial secret method, was alarmed. Although he had a premonition, when he heard the news of Xiahou Jie's death, his heart still trembled and he stood there in silence. Although Lin Sun had never met Xiahou Jie had spoken up many times in the mulberry forest and protected Lin Sun with his power and influence. But such a supremely righteous king had fallen. Lin Sun's mood became gloomy and he felt lost. Several days later, more and more news about the mulberry forest came back, plunging the Xiozhia of the empire into mourning. The atmosphere was oppressive and dead. Near the mysterious Taoist palace, horrible creatures that have stepped into the divine path started a shocking battle and blew up that area. All the Xiozhia who got close were affected and killed on the spot. According to statistics, more than a dozen half-step Xiozhia have died so far. Even the General Xiexian is missing. The gate of the mysterious Taoist palace has been opened. Great opportunities have come to the world. Those horrible creatures that have stepped into the divine path have completely gone mad. In order to fight for the opportunities, they have turned that area into a bloody purgatory. General Xiexian is still missing. The only good news is that many Xiozhia of our empire have sensed the danger and withdrawn from the mulberry forest early. This time, not only our empire, but also the Gold Amber King of the Gold Barbarian branch of the Voodoo Barbarian tribe, has been killed by a black vine tree that has stepped into the divine path. In addition, King Thunder Sky of the Thunder Barbarian branch and King Yanxiong of the Fire Barbarian branch were both seriously injured. Fortunately, they survived and have now retreated to the camp of the Voodoo Barbarians. It is said that they will not have the ability to fight in a short time. As for the death of other strong Voodoo barbarians, it is also impossible to count. Lin Sun was practicing martial arts every day. However, he also heard the news that came back these days. In addition to sighing and feeling lost, he could not help at all. What on earth is hidden in that mysterious Taoist palace? Why do those horrible creatures that have stepped into the divine path crazily fight for it? More than once, Lin Sun thought about this question. Unfortunately, he couldn't figure it out. For him, the divine path seemed too far away, and he couldn't imagine what kind of opportunity could make those horrible creatures crazy. In order to relieve the depression in his heart, Lin Sun spent all his energy on cultivation. When the catastrophe of the Tao really comes, these horrible creatures that are dormant in the mulberry forest are bound to be unwilling to be lonely. Or, the reason why they are dormant is to wait for the arrival of a real great world. Lin Sun had a hunch that the road of struggle for the Tao in the future was destined to become more cruel and fierce than before. Nowadays, only by seizing all the time and opportunities to improve his strength could he have the qualification to stand firm when the great world came. Reincarnation Development Realm, Life and Death Realm, 9 Tribulations of Longevity. I still have a long way to go to the divine path, but time is a little tight. After returning from the bloodthirsty battlefield this time, I have to go to the ancient desolation realm in any case. Only there will I be able to find more ways to become stronger, as well as obtain more information regarding the Great Arrow War. Lin Sun secretly made a decision. The storm about the mulberry forest lasted for half a month before it calmed down. Both the Empire and the Voodoo Barbarian tribe suffered heavy losses in this storm, and their morale suffered an unprecedented blow. Now, the mulberry forest seemed to have become a forbidden area that made people pale at the mention of it, and no one dared to approach it. During this half a month, Lin Sun had already thoroughly comprehended and mastered the secret method of the imperial control. The only thing he lacked might be actual combat practice. That night, Lin Sun finally relaxed and planned to gather his friends, Lu Wenting, Huang, Hu Tong, and Yen Feng. However, when he went to find Hu Tong, he found that the latter was not in the camp. Boss went out for a mission 3 days ago, and there has been no news from him until now. Abi's voice was low, and her eyebrows were full of sorrow and haze. She looked dazed as if she had lost her soul. Chapter 736. Lin Sun was upset to learn that Hu Tong had been missing for 3 days. Lin Sun had only made a few friends since he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield, and Hu Tong was one of them. Hu Tong's disappearance made Lin Sun lose the mood to party. What mission did he carry out? Lin Sun asked. Bai was startled, and then her eyes lit up with a hint of hope on her pretty face. Are you going to save the boss? Lin Sun nodded. I'll set off tomorrow morning. Bai's eyes suddenly turned red and she hugged Lin Sun tightly. You must bring the boss back. I'm really afraid that I won't see him again. Lin Sun patted Bai's shoulder without saying anything. Whether Hu Tong was dead or alive, and whether Zhang Sun Lai and Lu Wenting agreed or not, he would go and see for himself. When Lin Sun returned to his room late at night, he suddenly found that Yen Feng had been waiting for him. A friend of mine just came back from the bloodthirsty battlefield and heard some bad news about you. It's said that the dark barbarians will send real kings to attack Camp 7 in order to kill you. When he saw Lin Sun, Yen Feng immediately went straight to the point and warned Lin Sun to be careful. Lin Sun was shocked. Until Yen Feng left, he had been thinking that the dark barbarians would really send their kings to kill him. It seemed to be making a fuss over nothing. But Lin Sun had to consider the consequences if it really happened. Fine, I'll go and find out for myself tomorrow. The next morning, Lin Sun carried his luggage and left Camp 7 quietly without alerting anyone. At the same time, Lin Sun also wanted to find out some information about the dark barbarians. On the day Lin Sun left, a spy returned from the front battlefield and sent back a piece of shocking news. General, it's confirmed that the Ghost Spirit King of the Dark Barbarians and the Green Soul King of the Wood Barbarians will join forces and lead an army to attack our Camp 7. The spy said quickly. Zhang Sun Lai's pupils suddenly shrank, and he was about to slap the table, but he held back in the end. He took a deep breath and said, Are they going to start a full-scale war? No, they only have one purpose, which is to kill the 12th child Lin. The spy gave an unexpected answer, and Zhang Sun Lai couldn't help but be startled. His face immediately turned ashen. Mobilizing such a large force just to deal with a youth from my empire? That's insane. General! The spy was hesitant. If you have something to say, then say it. Why are you hesitating? Zhang Sun Lai berated. The reason why they mobilize so many people this time is that Mr. Lin's influence is too great. Just today, on the blood list wanted notice issued by the Voodoo Barbarian tribe, Mr. Lin's ranking has risen from 18th to 9th. Moreover, the young master of the Dark Barbarian royal family, In Kei, also died at the hands of young Master Lin. In Kei's identity is extremely special, and his death completely infuriated the entire Dark Barbarian race. That Phantom Spirit King even said that if we take the initiative to hand over young Master Lin, they will not attack us. Otherwise, if not what? Zhang Sun Lai's expression grew even more ashen. Otherwise, they will not hesitate to pay any price to flatten our camp. Pa Zhangxuan Lai couldn't bear it any longer and smashed the table in front of him. He suddenly stood up, and his eyes burst with terrifying cold light. How arrogant you are! Do you really think that I, Zhang Sun Lai, am a herbivore? If I can't even protect a little guy, I will be a general in vain. The spy's heart trembled, knowing that Zhang Sun Lai was completely enraged. When are those old voodoo barbarians going to court death? Zhang Sunlai asked. 3 days later. The spy replied quickly. On this day, the 7th camp of the Empire was on full alert. Both the Imperial Army of Practitioners and the individual practitioners distributed in the camp received the news that a voodoo barbarian army jointly led by Phantom Spirit King and Green Soul King would attack in 3 days. For a moment, all the practitioners were shocked and nervous. When they learned that the enemy mobilized so many people just to kill Lin Sun, all the practitioners in the 7th camp were dumbfounded. Were the enemies crazy? The 8 camps of the Empire had stood in the bloodthirsty battlefield for thousands of years. They had been tempered by the flames of war and smoke of gunpowder, and had never been breached so far. Now, the 2 voodoo barbarian kings threatened to destroy the 7th camp if they didn't hand over Lin Sun. How could they not be shocked? For a moment, the atmosphere in the 7th camp was tense and depressing, as if a storm was coming. It was not that everyone was in danger, but it was absolutely a lie not to be nervous and worried. After all, there was only one king in the 7th camp, Zhang Sunlai, while the enemy dispatched 2 kings this time. Moreover, the Phantom Spirit King was the top assassin king in the Dark Barbarians. His prestige was enough to make people pale at the mention of him. Under such circumstances, who could not be nervous and worried? There was no doubt that the 7th camp was destined to set off a bloody storm. Once a battle of such a scale broke out, the consequences were bound to be extremely serious. If it weren't for Lin Shi, how could such a thing happen? In my opinion, for the sake of the overall situation, it may be the wisest choice to send Lin Shi from the 7th camp to other camps as soon as possible. Someone couldn't help complaining. Suddenly, this practitioner suffered from the angry criticism of the crowd. Bullshit. Do you think the enemy will give up attacking the 7th camp if Lin Sun leaves? F***ck your mother. You're actually putting all the blame on Grandmaster Lin. Are you looking to die? Bah. What a disgrace. Before long, a team of elite guards appeared and took away the practitioner who complained about Lin Sun. They sent him to the General Zhang Sunlai. After that, this man never appeared again. On the same day, Zhang Sunlai issued a murderous order. In the face of a great war, whoever dares to mislead the people and disturb the morale of the army will be killed. Suddenly, all the practitioners realized that the general would rather fight to the end to protect Lin Sun. As time went by, the atmosphere in the camp became more and more tense and depressing. A storm was brewing. However, on the 2nd day, a king from the Empire Camp No. 1 appeared, which made everyone feel a lot more relaxed. This king was named Qin Chu. He was dressed in a white robe with a handsome face and a willow beard. He looked elegant and refined. What about Lin Shi? As soon as Qin Chu arrived, he asked to see Lin Sun. Zhang Sunlai was stunned and turned to look at Lu Wenting. Lu Wenting said in a low voice with a bitter face, "He left the camp yesterday morning." Then, he told Lin Sun everything about Hu Tong's disappearance, making it clear that Lin Sun did not run away out of fear of war. This guy escaped the disaster by accident. Zhang Sunlai's face became very strange. It was better that Lin Sun was not in the camp. However, Qin Chu frowned and said unhappily, "Does he think he has not caused enough trouble? Because of him, he has caused such a big storm, which may even set off an all-out war between our empire and the voodoo barbarian tribe. Today, he disobeyed the order and acted alone. It's outrageous." Lu Wenting's face changed. He realized that Qin Chu seemed to have some kind of opinion about Lin Sun. Zhang Sunlai glanced at Qin Chu and said, "It's not the time to discuss these trifles in the face of a great war." Trifles? Qin Chu sighed. There are only 3 months left before the next passage to the Empire is opened. If a large-scale war breaks out at this time, our supplies will be greatly affected. Who can bear the consequences? Zhang Sunlai's eyes suddenly narrowed and he said, "There's still 3 months of time. It's still a bit too early to speak of all this. Not to mention that if we blame a young man because of the enemy's so-called large-scale attack, then it would seem to be very inappropriate. I didn't say that. I just don't want any more accidents to happen during this period. Qin Chu flicked his nails and said casually, but it is obvious that Lin Shi is a troublemaker, which makes me have some opinions about him. Zhang Sunlai was a little angry. Let's fight this fierce battle first and then talk about these things. However, what Zhang Sunlai did not expect was that the enemy came one day in advance. Woo, 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 the vast horn sounded from the distant horizon, echoing between heaven and earth. Soon, densely packed figures emerged like a tide, like an overwhelming black wave, spreading towards Camp 7. That was the Voodoo barbarian army, with tens of thousands of people. All of them were armed with weapons and full of murderous intent. When they gathered together, the terrible murderous intent seemed to be real, soaring into the sky and disturbing the universe. In an instant, the entire Camp 7 was alarmed, and the practitioners of the Empire were a little unprepared. They did not expect that the enemy would come one day in advance. Get ready to fight. Roars sounded one after another. Brothers, the Voodoo barbarian bastards dare to come here to die. It's time for us to harvest military merits. Are you ready? Heroic and impassioned shouts also came from all over the camp. The entire Camp 7, like a long-prepared fierce beast, was awakened and showed its ferocious fangs. Wei Yuan battleship, Soaring Eagle battleship, Ziying battleship, and other densely packed battleships rose in the roar. This was already a war, not a scattered individual battle. For a moment, the wind and clouds in this area were surging, and the murderous intent was like smoke rising to the sky. The horrible airflow was raging silently, rendering the world extremely solemn. Zhang Sunlai and Qin Chu, the two kings, rose into the air, looking at the army of Voodoo barbarians in the distance calmly. Although the enemy had appeared a day ahead of time, as experienced kings, they were not surprised or surprised. The art of war is the art of deception. Such small accidents were all too common. However, very quickly, Zhang Sunlai and Qin Chu's expressions changed slightly. Their original composure were also affected, and their expressions became grave and gloomy, which was rare for them. There were actually 4 barbarian kings in the enemy army. This was completely different from what the information said about the 2 kings attacking. P.S. Today is New Year's Eve. Together with the protagonist Lin Sun and the auspicious beast Old Toad, I wish everyone a happy new year, a prosperous source of wealth, good food, and a happy family. Chapter 737. Rise from Insignificance. Chapter 728. Suddenly show up the next chapter. Damn Voodoo barbarian bastards. How could they be so insidious and treacherous? Zhang Sunlai gnashed his teeth, his eyes glowing with a frightening luster. Qin Chu next to him also lost his elegant demeanor and looked a little flustered and exasperated. He said angrily, "See? This is the trouble caused by that guy." "Are you afraid?" Zhang Sunlai was furious. How could this guy say such words at such a critical moment? It's not a matter of fear, but a matter of life and death of a camp of the Empire. Qin Chu scolded. Zhang Sunlai didn't bother to care about it anymore. In the face of the war, if these disputes happened again, it would definitely disturb the army's morale. No, the enemy has 4 barbarian kings. In the camp, some sharp-eyed practitioners also found it and cried out involuntarily. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Suddenly, the aggressive imperial practitioners, who were ready to fight, all held their breath and showed signs of disorder. This discovery was like a blow to the head, bringing a heavy blow to the morale of all the practitioners in the 7th camp. 4 barbarian kings attacked together. This power was so horrible that almost no hope of victory could be seen. The atmosphere in the camp suddenly seemed to be frozen and became extremely depressed. Every practitioner's face was cloudy and their emotions fluctuated. "What are you afraid of?" Our seventh camp has been established for thousands of years and experienced many storms. Things more dangerous than this have happened before. Zhang Sunlai shouted with a thunderous voice. Spiritual tattooists of the Ordnance Department, get ready. When necessary, open the 8-level holy formation. 8-level holy formation. When these words came out, many of the older generation cultivators relaxed inwardly. Thousands of years ago, in order to fight against the voodoo barbarian tribe, the founding emperor specially invited a spiritual tattooist from the ancient Desolation realm to the bloodthirsty battlefield to set up a defensive formation for each of the 8 camps of the empire. Each formation was branded with the mysterious patterns of the Holy Path and had the power to shock the world and make ghosts cry. Especially when in the most dangerous situation, the 8 formations could cooperate with each other to form a large formation group. However, because the power needed to open such a formation was too great, the Empire would not easily open it unless it was a critical moment. Obviously, the current situation could already be considered to be dangerous and grim, and that was the reason why Zhang Sunlai would give such an order. Knowing this, the tense and uneasy atmosphere in the camp eased up a lot, and the Imperial practitioners regained their composure. Only Qin Chu was frowning. He lowered his voice and said, "The resources we have now are only enough to last until the next time the passageway opens. If we activate the 8 extreme sacred formation now, the remaining resources will be used up in less than 10 days. If the resources are gone, I'm sure you know the severity of the consequences better than me. There's no other way. With the enemy at the gates, we can only fight. How can we care about the future?" Zhang Sunlai took a deep breath and said, "Of course, it depends on the situation. I'd like to see whether these barbarian bastards dare to start this war or not." In the distance, the army was pressing, and the dense voodoo barbarians were like tides. They stopped when they were thousands of feet away from the camp. They were full of killing intent. Although they didn't move forward, their killing intent still changed the weather, and the atmosphere became extremely oppressive, making it hard for people to breathe. In this chilling atmosphere, Zhang Sunlai laughed up to the sky. He stepped into the void, majestic and proud, and shouted, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be the Ghost Spirit King, Green Soul King, Calming Mountain King, and Baitsong King. What's wrong with you 4 old bastards? Are you tired of living? Do you want to die?" His voice was like a thunderclap, rumbling in the wilderness. On the side of the voodoo barbarian army, an old man stepped out. He was like a shadow, covered in gray mist, mysterious like a ghost. "Zhang Sunlai, I'm not here to quarrel with you. I think you already know why we're here. Hand over Lin Shi'er, and we'll leave immediately. We won't encroach on an inch of your camp. Otherwise, don't blame us for wiping this place out." The old man was the Ghost Spirit King. His voice was cold and gloomy, drifting between heaven and earth, with a piercing coldness that made people uncomfortable. He was a king, and a king proficient in the art of assassination. His ferocious name had spread across the bloodthirsty battlefield a long time ago. Lin Shi'er. Sure enough, this large-scale war that was about to break out was just for the sake of young Master Lin. In Camp 7, the practitioners of the Empire were completely enlightened, but at the same time, they were shocked. Young Master Lin had only been in the bloodthirsty battlefield for a short time, but his influence was already so great that the enemy would not hesitate to start a war to kill him. "Ha ha, you're really arrogant. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want with 4 kings and force me to bow my head?" Zhang Sunlai laughed, but his face was extremely cold. "In your dreams. As long as I'm here, I won't frown even if you start a full-scale war, let alone the few of you." However, the Ghost Spirit King was unmoved. He said leisurely, "I admit that with the 8 Supreme Holy Formation, it's indeed difficult to wipe out everything here. However, as far as I know, you don't have many resources left. If you activate the 8th Supreme Holy Formation just for a young man, I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on until the next time you get supplies from the Empire. As soon as these words came out, many practitioners in Camp 7 changed their expressions slightly. And Zhang Sunlai also narrowed his eyes. Only then did he realize that the enemy had come prepared this time. This isn't good. They've already figured out the situation on our side. Qin Chu's face was gloomy. His eyes flickered as he transmitted his voice. Didn't you say that Lin Shi is not in the camp now? Why don't we take a compromise and tell them the truth and lure them to deal with Lin soon? In this way, we can buy some time for us to ask for more help from the other camp. Enough. Zhang Sunlai was instantly enraged. I can't do such a dirty thing. You. Qin Chu's face darkened. If you're afraid, get out of here. Zhang Sunlai scolded. He was increasingly displeased with Qin Chu. If it weren't for the enemy's army, he would have beaten him up. What compromise? It was obvious that Qin Chu wanted to direct all the trouble to Lin Shi alone. Zhang Sunlai would never do such a shameless thing. Fine. I'd like to see how you're going to solve the current predicament. Qin Chu was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. Zhang Sunlai snorted and ignored him. Zhang Sunlai, what do you think? If we really start this war, although there will be some casualties, it will be enough to force you to activate the 8th-level Holy Formation. At that time we can totally withdraw. But if you don't have enough supplies, I'm afraid the consequences are not something you can bear. The Phantom Spirit King spoke again, as if he had everything planned out and was sure of victory. In Camp 7, a group of practitioners looked at each other with gloomy expressions. This embarrassing situation where they could neither advance nor retreat was completely beyond their expectation. They were somewhat at a loss. There's no need to think about it. If you want to fight, then fight. If not, then get out of here. Zhang Sunlai scolded without hesitation. Ha, in that case, don't blame us for being rude. But to be honest, we didn't intend to be kind this time. The Phantom Spirit King laughed, and his aura soared into the sky. It was eerie and terrifying. I've said that this is the best time to beat them when they are down. They are short of supplies and dare not start a real large-scale war. A green figure appeared, with mysterious totem tattoos all over his body. He was the Green Soul King from the Wood Barbarian branch. It's useless to say more. Let's do it. I haven't seen the power of the 8th-level Holy Formation for a long time. This time, I'd like to see whether the Camp 7 can stop us. King Ning Yu also appeared. His figure was like a mountain, with a sense of unshakable majesty. Let's hurry up. I don't want to wait for the experts from other camps of the Empire to come to the rescue. If we can take this opportunity to take the head of Zhang Sunlai, I'll be very satisfied. In the rolling waves, a slender figure was condensed, with green eyes and a solemn and dignified look. It was King Baitsong of the Water Barbarian branch. Kill! The Voodoo Barbarian army, which was ready for battle, roared in unison, shaking the clouds in all directions. The horrible killing intent instantly shrouded the area. In the Camp 7, the practitioners of the Empire all looked dignified and ready for battle. A group of spiritual tattooists all looked at Zhang Sunlai, wondering whether to open the 8th-level Holy Formation at this time. Don't forget, the consequences are very serious. Even Qin Chu beside him couldn't help saying. Zhang Sunlai fell into a rare silence. But in the end, he suddenly gritted his teeth, and a touch of determination burst out of his eyes. If I can't even protect a young man of my empire today, I'd better kill myself. His voice was sonorous and unquestionable. Fight! The practitioners of the empire were also influenced by him and became hot-blooded. Who wouldn't be angry when being bullied by the enemy in front of their home? The men of the empire had never been afraid of fighting. Then fight! Zhang Sunlai waved his hand and was about to order to open the 8th-level Holy Formation. But at this time, a figure suddenly rose into the air, and came to Zhang Sun Lai's side. "I'm willing to help you with my bow and arrows." That figure was Lin Sun, who had returned to the camp at some time. Seeing Lin Sun, the practitioners of the Empire were all moved, while Qin Chu was stunned. He didn't expect that the young man didn't hide at such a dangerous time, but took the initiative to show up. On the side of the voodoo barbarian army, the 4 kings, including the Ghost Spirit King, showed their burning killing intent. Their goal this time was to kill this young man. At this moment, even Zhang Sun Lai was slightly stunned. "General, catch!" Lin Sun took out the insignificance bow and the blue sky arrow and handed them to Zhang Sun Lai. Buzz! The insignificance bow, which was made of white bones and skeletons, seemed to feel the chilling atmosphere in the field, and made a longing quiver. Chapter 738. A mysterious big bow made of white bones and a divine arrow that exuded a boundless aura immediately attracted the attention of everyone as soon as they appeared. Now, both the Empire and the voodoo barbarians had heard too much about Lin Sun's brilliant achievements. And in these achievements there were all kinds of speculations and rumors about the mysterious white bone bow and the black divine arrow. Because in their opinion, it was this pair of bows and arrows that allowed Lin Sun, who was only at the Tao Insight realm, to have the incredible feat of killing a half-step king across realms. This is a pair of complete ancient secret treasures. Its origin is unknown. It may be passed down from a saint. This was the speculation of most strong masters, which was amazing and attractive. Therefore, when Lin Sun took out this pair of mysterious bows and arrows at this time, all the people present were attracted to them. "What a treasure!" Zhang Sun Lai exclaimed. As he opened and closed his eyes, strands of divine light bloomed. He could keenly feel the mystery and horror of this pair of bows and arrows, which made his heart tremble. In the distance, King of Devious Spirits, King of Green Soul, King of Ningyue, and King of Azure slightly narrowed their eyes and looked a little dignified. Although they were very far away, with their cultivation, they could easily perceive the aura of the insignificant spiritual bow and arrow of azure sky. It was terrifying. This was their intuition. When they thought that this pair of bows and arrows had easily killed a half-step king, even they had to treat it with caution. The black divine arrow was lost in the depths of Tiger Valley. "It should have belonged to us," King of Devious Spirits murmured. The spectral king muttered with a burning gaze in his eyes. "This time, perhaps we should go all out and seize this pair of treasures. Yes, their aura is extremely obscure and terrifying. Although I can't feel the aura of holy treasures for the time being, my intuition tells me that even if they are not holy treasures, they are definitely not inferior to holy treasures." A touch of greed surged in the hearts of King of Green Soul and the other 3 kings. Even they didn't have such heaven-defying treasures. How could they not be tempted? But immediately they became vigilant, because at this time, Zhang Sun Lai had taken the big bow, pulled the bowstring fully, and pointed it at them. Buzz! When the blood-red bowstring was fully drawn, mysterious and terrifying phenomena appeared around the bow. Wind and thunder rumbled, gods and devils roared, the stars exploded, the myriad of Daos collapsed, the sun fell from the sky, and the golden crow cried in the blue ocean. An indescribably terrifying aura swept out, causing the heavens and the earth to fall silent. Suppression. The void seemed to be unable to bear it and collapsed silently. The army of voodoo barbarians in the distance was even more frightened at this moment. Their blood was frozen, and they were about to suffocate and collapse. Not good. The expressions of the King of Spirits and the others changed. They also felt the bone-piercing killing intent. It was too terrifying, and it made them feel as if there was a blade on their backs, making their hair stand on end. And this was merely the power of a fully drawn bow. Zhang Sun Lai stood tall in the void with the bowstring fully drawn. He was like an ancient god descending to the world. His arrogant and heroic appearance shocked all the cultivators of the empire. Even Lin Sun was surprised. The power of the insignificant spiritual bow at this moment was obviously many times stronger than when it was in his hands. Is this the real power of the insignificant spiritual bow? Lin Sun murmured in his heart. This is definitely a pair of supreme treasures passed down from ancient times. It has been stained with countless blood. The murderous intent is so strong that it can disturb the yin and yang of the universe. Qin Chu's heart pounded violently, and his eyes widened with an imperceptible heat. Such a treasure falling into the hands of Lin Shire was simply like a pearl covered in dust. Do it! In the distance there was a violent roar. King of Green Soul was the first to feel that something was wrong. He attacked fiercely. He took out a halberd made of animal bones and slashed it in the air at Zhang Sunlai. Boom! This halberd was obviously not an ordinary treasure. It was more than 3 meters long. As it soared into the air, layers of strange totems appeared, and ancient spells resounded through the world. The void collapsed, and the world seemed to be torn in half. It was so horrible that the power of a real king was vividly displayed. Lin Sun's hands and feet were cold. He had no doubt that if he faced this blow, he would be crushed to death in an instant without any strength to fight back. This was the power of a king. Bang! Almost at the same time, Zhang Sunlai also shot out the sky arrow. It was as if it was unparalleled. With an extremely fierce and almost invincible terrifying power, it suddenly appeared in the world. It was too fast. It was too horrible. Some cultivators' eyes were stinging, and their minds were shaking. They couldn't see clearly or perceive it at all. With an earth-shattering bang, the halberd of white bone was shaken and flew backward with an ear-piercing whine. A large part of the blade of the halberd was broken. Oh no! In the distance, Green Soul King was so shocked that he almost jumped up. He was extremely afraid of the pair of bows and arrows, which was why he took action in advance. Only now did he realize that he still underestimated the terror of this pair of treasures. He wanted to dodge, but a black stream of light flashed, and his body was directly blasted into 2 halves. His flesh and blood exploded, turning into scarlet blood rain that scattered in the void. A King Realm expert couldn't dodge in time and was killed. When they saw this scene, the Spirit King, Ningyu King, and Azure King, who wanted to help, were also shocked. They felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Just what kind of terrifying treasure was this to be able to kill a King Realm expert in an instant? Their faces changed drastically, and a chill ran down their spines. They were almost scared out of their wits. The atmosphere was dead silent. Both the Imperial cultivators and the voodoo barbarians fell into a daze. 1 arrow killed a king. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have dared to imagine such a shocking power. It was so shocking that they almost broke their gut. Sure enough, the true power of the insignificant spiritual bow and azure arrow has never been displayed by me. Lin Sun was also a little shocked. The insignificant spiritual bow and azure arrow were originally his treasures, but until now, he hadn't been able to fully control them. It was also at this time that they fell into Zhang Sunlai's hands that Lin Sun saw the true power of this pair of treasures. They were absolutely peerless murderous weapons, and their sharpness was invincible. Next to him, Qin Chu was shocked and absent-minded. His eyes seemed to be glued to the insignificant spiritual bow, and he could no longer move them away. It was too strong. If he had this pair of treasures in hand, where could he not show off his power? There was dead silence in the field. Zhang Sunlai didn't remain silent and continued to kill. Others couldn't see it, but he was secretly complaining in his heart. Even though this pair of bows and arrows were so ferocious that even he was deeply shocked, at the same time, it had almost exhausted all of his strength. General is mighty. All of a sudden, some practitioners shouted excitedly. Soon, the whole Camp 7 was filled with exhilarating shout. Who in the whole bloodthirsty battlefield could compete with such divine power to kill a king with 1 arrow? On the other hand, the morale of the voodoo barbarian army suffered an unprecedented blow. They were all anxious and uneasy. It was too terrible. Originally, they were aggressive and well-prepared, and they didn't take the Imperial practitioners seriously at all. But Zhang Sunlai's arrow was like a giant hammer, which hit their hearts hard and almost made their fighting spirit collapse. Not only them, but also King of Spirits, King of Ningyue, and King of Azure changed their expressions, and a chill came from the soles of their feet. The scene just happened in front of them, but they had no time to stop it. None of them dared to imagine if they would have been able to block the arrow if it had been aimed at them. It's not too late to get out of here. Zhang Sunlai took a deep breath and said. Lin Sun was stunned and immediately realized that the arrow just now almost drained all of Zhang Sunlai's strength. It seems that you can't shoot a second arrow. King of Spirits also seemed to see this, and said with a gloomy face. He was not willing to retreat. They came with so many people, but a king was killed by an arrow. In the end, they were so scared that they had to go back. If this news spread out, it would be a great loss of face. You're right. Zhang Sunlai looked very frank, but don't forget that I have a king with me. I just need to hand over the bow and arrow to him, and then he can kill one of you. As soon as he said this, King of Spirits and others changed their expressions. Or do you decide to continue to fight with us at the cost of another life? Zhang Sunlai's face was cold. That's good. I just need to open the 8-level holy formation and hold on until my strength recovers, and then I will have the power to kill you one by one. King of Spirits and others were silent. No matter who it was, they didn't want to joke with their lives. Moreover, they had to admit that Zhang Sunlai's calculation was very accurate. They didn't dare to act rashly again. But it would be too sullen and humiliating to let them go back in embarrassment like this. The Imperial practitioners were cheering and shouting, and their morale was high. No one expected that the situation would be completely reversed by the appearance of a pair of bows and arrows before the fierce battle broke out. It was like a dream. And all this was brought by Lin Sun, which made them look at Lin Sun with more fanaticism and admiration. Let me do it. Qin Chu took the initiative to volunteer, eager to have a try. His eyes were fanatical, and he couldn't wait to grab the pair of bows and arrows from Zhang Sunlai and try it himself. However, before Zhang Sunlai agreed, King of Spirits and others in the distance had already made a decision. Retreat. They retreated with a livid face, with endless anger and resentment. This was the safest decision, but undoubtedly, it was also the most shameful one. It was a great shame that such a result happened when the army was pressing on the border, which made them all depressed and ashamed. Boom, soon, the voodoo barbarian army retreated like a tide and disappeared into the horizon in the distance. Witnessing this scene, there was silence in the number 7 camp of the Empire. All the practitioners were in a trance, as if they still couldn't believe it. The enemy army commanded by the 4 barbarian kings retreated just like that? Originally, according to the normal track, a fierce large-scale war was destined to take place, but the situation was reversed and deviated, so that all this ended hastily before it happened. And what caused all this was the pair of bows and arrows in Lin Sun's hands. He killed the king with 1 arrow and shocked the enemy with 1 arrow, making them flee in fear. This was the real end of the world with 1 arrow. Chapter 739. At night, in the 7th camp, in a brightly lit palace hall, a banquet was being held in full swing. Ha ha, it's really fun today. Brother Zhang Sun killed the king with 1 arrow, scared off the enemy army, and made them flee like stray dogs. Such a grand occasion is really an eye-opener for me. Qin Chu laughed and proposed a toast to Zhang Sunlai. The dangerous situation during the day had been resolved. The enemy retreated in panic, which completely removed the threat to the 7th camp. Therefore, on this night, the whole 7th camp fell into a carnival. Not only this hall, but also other places were celebrating. Child Lin is also amazing. With a secret weapon, You stood up at the critical moment and provided Brother Zhang Sun with the opportunity to reverse the situation. Come on, I also propose a toast to you. While speaking, Qin Chu raised another glass of wine and looked at Lin Sun with a smile. Senior, you flatter me. Lin Sun drank up. The atmosphere was harmonious, but Lu Wenting didn't seem to like Qin Chu. He secretly transmitted a message to Lin Sun. Boy, don't be confused by the enthusiasm of this old guy. When he came to the camp before, he had a lot of opinions about you. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and secretly transmitted a message to Lu. Oh, what do you mean? Lu Wenting said, I'm not telling lies. It's just that Qin Chu's face is too ugly. You don't know how bad his attitude was before. As soon as he arrived at the camp, he accused you of making too much trouble. It's you who made too much trouble these days that caused today's war. Later on, when he saw the enemy's army bearing down on us, he even came up with a rotten idea. He wanted to divert this calamity onto you alone. Fortunately, General Zhang Sun firmly refused at that time. Otherwise, before he finished speaking, the meaning had been fully expressed. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and looked as calm as before, but his eyes had become much colder when he looked at Qin Chu. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. However, it's a small matter. You don't have to make it public. Anyway, Qin Chu is a king after all. It's not good to provoke him. Lu Wenting was worried that Lin Sun would lose his cool, so he reminded him. Lin Sun nodded. However, when the banquet was about to end, Qin Chu suddenly coughed and said with a serious look, There are less than 3 months left before the next opening of the road to the Empire. The enemy is ready to take advantage of this opportunity to start a war. As you all know, we don't have much supplies left in the 8 camps of the Empire. If the enemy starts a large-scale war at this time, it will definitely be a serious crisis for us. Zhang Sunlai nodded. That's right. What happened today is a proof of that. Our resources are limited, so we cannot easily activate the 8 extreme holy array. It is precisely because of this that the enemy dared to muster such a large force to attack us. Qin Chu smiled and looked at Lin Sun. So, I want to ask Child Lin for a favor. If you agree, you may be able to help our empire solve the problem in front of us, so that the practitioners in the 8 camps of our empire can hold on safely until the next opening of the same path. Seeing this, Zhang Sunlai frowned imperceptibly and realized that something was wrong. Lu Wenting winked at Lin Sun, as if telling him to be cautious and not to rush to agree. Oh senior, please tell me. Lin Sun looked calm. Qin Chu looked solemn and said solemnly, I want to borrow Child Lin's bow and arrows. With the power of this pair of peerless treasures, it is enough to deter the old monsters in the voodoo barbarian tribe and make them not dare to act rashly. It turned out to be this after so many twists and turns. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. He was finally sure that what Lu Wenting said might be true. The reason why Qin Chu was so enthusiastic to him at the banquet today was probably to make this request at this moment. Before Lin Sun spoke, Zhang Sunlai frowned and questioned, I'm afraid this is inappropriate. How can such treasures be lent out easily? Qin Chu said righteously, Brother Zhang Sun, I'm doing this for the sake of the cultivators in the 8 camps of our empire. I believe that if the generals in the other camps knew about this, they would definitely hope that young Master Lin can help us. After a pause, he continued, What's more, it's just a loan. When the passage to the Empire is opened 3 months later, this pair of treasures will be returned to us as they are. I wonder if Child Lin can temporarily give up your treasures for the sake of the overall situation of our empire? He looked at Lin Sun. He looked like he cared about the practitioners of the empire and considered the overall situation. He put on a righteous and sonorous voice, which made Zhang Sunlai somewhat unable to refute. But Zhang Sunlai knew that this guy could never be so selfless. If Lin Sun really lent out the pair of bows and arrows, there would be too many variables in the future. As the saying went, treasures could move people's hearts, let alone such an incredible treasure. Even Zhang Sunlai himself was extremely moved. Judging others by his own judgment, he was certain that even if it was a life-and-death king, facing this pair of bows and arrows, he would probably have many thoughts that he shouldn't have. But if he lent it to Qin Chu, there might really be an unforeseen event of no return. Sorry, I can't help you with this. To Zhang Sunlai's surprise, Lin Sun didn't have a trace of embarrassment at all and directly refused. This guy is really bold, Zhang Sunlai praised inwardly. However, this caught Qin Chu off guard, and his expression immediately became somewhat unsightly as he said in a deep voice, "Young Master Lin, this matter concerns the safety of an entire 8 camps of the Empire. As a cultivator of the Empire, how can you remain indifferent?" This was using righteousness to pressure Lin Sun. Lin Sun suddenly felt an unspeakable disgust in his heart. This old guy was too abominable. It was obviously Lin Sun who coveted his treasures, but he used the righteousness of the Empire to talk about it. He was simply shameless. Lin Sun smiled coldly. Without my help, the 8 camps of the Empire can't survive? For thousands of years, the reason why the Empire has been able to fight on the bloodthirsty battlefield to this day is probably not because of the treasures in my hands, right? If it were other practitioners, facing the request of a king, no matter how sullen they were in their hearts, they would probably have to yield. But Lin Sun didn't, which made Qin Chu feel more and more ashamed. He was a little annoyed, and his attitude became rude. "Child Lin, you are too selfish. If this spreads out, I'm afraid all the practitioners of the Empire will be bitterly disappointed. Qin Chu, you are too much. The treasures are his own. Why should he lend them out?" Zhang Sunlai couldn't stand it anymore and shouted. The lively and harmonious atmosphere in the banquet was gone, and it became a little depressed and tense. However, Qin Chu stood up with a serious expression, and his eyes were like lightning. He said coldly, "Why? Because this matter concerns the safety of the 8 camps of the Empire. You, Zhang Sunlai, can be indifferent, but I can't. Today I'd rather offend you, but I must do this properly." Zhang Sunlai also slapped the table and stood up. He was so angry that he laughed. "Are you going to rob us?" "No, I'm just using my own methods to make young Master Lin help our empire." Even the imperial court couldn't listen to this anymore. This is obviously nonsense and nonsense. Even an idiot would know that this is blatant lying. But Lin Sun seemed to believe it. He clapped and praised, "Senior, you are really bold. In this case, why don't we make a written agreement? I will lend the treasures in my hands, and you promise that when the passage to the Empire opens in 3 months, you will take out all the wealth and power of your Qin family and invest it in the bloodthirsty battlefield. What do you think?" Of course Qin Chu was about to agree. He thought that it was just a written agreement, which couldn't bind him and the Qin family behind him at all. But immediately, he felt that something was wrong. At this moment, Zhang Sunlai was very calm, and didn't have any intention of stopping him. He even seemed to be eager for him to do so. This was too abnormal. Qin Chu changed the topic and said, "This matter can be discussed in detail later. Now I just want to ask, is Child Lin still unwilling to help?" The cold light in his eyes flowed with threat. It seemed that as long as Lin Sun said no, he would immediately take action. Zhang Sunlai sighed and said, "If you sign this agreement, I would be very happy to help. Unfortunately, you don't dare to. This only proves that all the righteousness you just said is AF King Bullsh T excuse." Chapter 740. Zhang Sunlai's resolute attitude moved Lin Sun and made him feel warm in his heart. Since he stepped into the Empire, he had never lacked enemies along the way. Similarly, he had never lacked friends, such as Drillmaster Young Ku, Mr. Vulture, Zhu Laosan, Ning Meng, Sure Yu like Old Toad, Zhao Tailai, Shinta. Now in the bloodthirsty battlefield, Zhang Sunlai might have scolded him more than once, But Lin Sun knew that this general had never regarded him as an outsider. Just like today's war storm, if it was any other selfish big shot, they would probably put the overall situation first and sacrifice themselves. But Zhang Sunlai didn't. Just like at this moment, in the face of Qin Chu's hypocritical and ugly face, Zhang Sunlai could also stand by and watch, but he didn't do so. How could Lin Sun not be moved? At this moment, Qin Chu's face was gloomy. He was silent for a while and suddenly said, "Brother Zhang Sun, today's arrow has consumed a lot of your physical strength. If you choose to fight now, I'm afraid you can't stop me at all." "What if I fight with my life?" Zhang Sunlai said coldly. Qin Chu's face changed slightly and he said, "You should know that I do this for the imperial court." What's more, he wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. But Qin Chu, as the person involved, had a different look at the moment. Chapter 741. If it was someone else who dared to do this to him, Qin Chu would have slapped that person to death. That person must be tired of living. After all, Qin Chu was still a king-level figure. In the whole world, he could be regarded as a monstrous existence at the peak. But now, in the face of Zhao Xingye's mockery, he didn't dare to be angry at all. This woman was too terrifying. Not only was her identity too respected, but her strength could also be regarded as an outstanding figure among the kings. Qin Chu had no doubt that if he dared to show any dissatisfaction, the consequences would be worse than death. Qin Chu felt so wronged that he was about to vomit blood. His face turned green and he couldn't speak for a long time. His embarrassed appearance made Lin Sun and Zhang Sunlai laugh secretly. "General Zhao, you're not joking, are you?" After holding it in for a long time, Qin Chu said embarrassedly with an embarrassed face. Zhao Xingye raised a pair of straight black eyebrows, slightly pursed her red lips, and said unhappily, "General Qin Chu, I just bowed to you on behalf of the Empire. Do you think I'm joking?" Her voice was still soft, but it was like a sharp sword against his throat. It made Qin Chu's body stiffen, and his face changed again. In the end, Qin Chu gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, "General Zhao, you worry too much. Since I have said this, I will try my best to fulfill it. However, this matter is of great importance, and I can't make the decision for the Qin family alone. When I return to the Empire, I will discuss with the clan as soon as possible and solve this matter appropriately." His face was livid. Everyone knew that he was so angry and sullen that he was about to go berserk. Seeing this, Zhao Xingye immediately nodded happily. "That couldn't be better. Then I wish General Qin Chu success in advance." Qin Chu left with a chest full of depression and discomfort. He was worried that if he didn't leave, he would vomit blood and die of anger. Thinking that he only borrowed a pair of bows and arrows this time, but he got himself into trouble and went for wool and came home shorn, Qin Chu was so angry that he wanted to slap himself twice. "Damn it! General Zhao, thank you for solving the problem for us." Within the hall, Zhang Sunlai withdrew his smile and bowed seriously. If Zhao Xingye hadn't arrived tonight, then the consequences would have been slightly unpredictable. "You're welcome. I'm glad that General Qin Chu is dedicated to the public. Rather than saying that you've solved a problem, it's more like you've facilitated a wonderful event." Zhao Xingye's words were casual. She sat there casually. Her beauty could topple a city. Her black eyes were bright, and her skin was as white as snow. It was hard to imagine how such a beautiful woman could be called bloodthirsty queen. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, it would be hard for Lin Sun to imagine that a life-death realm king like Qin Chu dared not even fart in the face of Zhao Xingye's difficulties. Perhaps this was the true power of great power. "General Zhao, do you really think that the Qin family will fulfill this promise?" Zhang Sunlai was surprised. However, Zhao Xingye smiled slightly, and his fiery lips curled into a disdainful arc. "If they dare to do so, then don't blame me for personally going to their door to ask for it." Now, Lin and Zhang Sunlai finally believed that Zhao Xingye was not joking. The heavens were planning to ruthlessly rip off the Qin family. Lin Sun gasped and felt a little strange in his heart. In the past, he was always regarded as bold and strong, but compared with Zhao Xingye, this beautiful and terrible woman, he was nothing. Zhang Sunlai couldn't help glancing at Lin Sun, as if secretly comparing Lin Sun with Zhao Xingye to see who was bolder. Surprised? Zhao Xingye smiled. She flicked her nails and said, as if it was a matter of course, "Don't forget that I'm also a woman, and women are best at pestering and seeking revenge for the smallest grievance." Zhang Sunlai chuckled, gloating in his heart. He felt some sympathy and pity for Qin Chu. If this guy knew this, would he cry? Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Women? Who really dared to treat a general with the title of bloodthirsty queen as an ordinary woman? "Little guy, can you lend me your bow and arrows?" Suddenly, Zhao Xingye looked at Lin Sun with a pair of beautiful eyes and made a request. This made Zhang Sunlai's eyes suddenly narrow, a little startled and surprised. Zhao Xingye, however, looked calm and indifferent. She looked at Lin Sun quietly and did not exert any pressure. "Okay." Lin Sun was silent for a moment, facing Zhao Xingye's eyes calmly, and said, "However, I have a condition." Zhang Sunlai was so shocked that he almost covered Lin Sun's mouth. How dare he talk about conditions with Zhao Xingye at this time? This kid was simply audacious to the extreme. Zhao Xingye's dark and bright beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. She said with a faint smile, "Oh, tell me. If you go to the Qin family in person one day to ask for an explanation, please take me with you. I just want to have a look, that's all." Lin Sun said an unexpected condition, which made Zhang Sunlai slightly stunned and surprised. What was this guy doing? He even wanted to get involved in this kind of thing? Zhao Xingye burst into laughter, and her beautiful eyes were full of strange color. She stared at Lin Sun with a smile and looked him up and down, as if to get to know him again. After a while, she nodded. "Okay." Lin Sun also smiled and handed over Insignificant's bow and arrow of blue sky without hesitation. "I will return them to you in 10 days at most." This was Zhao Xingye's promise. It was late at night and Lin Sun left soon. Sure enough, this guy is also a black-hearted master. With his deep shrewdness and mind, whoever provokes him will have a headache in the future. Zhao Xingye's white and slender hand gently stroked the Insignificant's bow in her hand. A pair of beautiful eyes looked in the direction of Lin Sun's departure, and there was a faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Black-hearted? I think this guy is really bold. Zhang Sunlai couldn't help sighing when he thought of some things Lin Sun had done these days. Immediately, he frowned and said, however, according to his character, "I'm surprised that he lent this pair of treasures so readily this time." Zhao Xingye squinted at him. "Do you think I took advantage of him?" Without waiting for an answer, Zhao Xingye smiled playfully and said, "If it wasn't for the fact that I need this pair of weapons to do something, I really wouldn't agree to his condition." Zhang Sunlai was stunned, and he pondered carefully for a moment before coming to a sudden understanding, and he slapped his thigh. "So that's how it is, this kid is really treacherous enough." The situation was actually very simple. Although Zhao Xingye had forced Qin Chu to comply with his promise, Qin Chu had no choice but to follow through on his promise. However, everyone knew that it was impossible for the Qin clan, one of the 7 upper-class clans of the empire, to devote all of its wealth and power to the empire. Because this was simply no different than destroying the Qin clan, and even the current emperor probably wouldn't dare to do this rashly. After all, the Qin clan was one of the high-level clans in the end. They possessed enormous resources and power, and their influence in the empire was too great. If they were driven to desperation, then it would absolutely cause an unpredictable upheaval and calamity. Under such circumstances, the conditions put forward by Lin Sun were thought-provoking. He proposed to go to the Qin clan with Zhao Xingye to see how Zhao Xingye would ask for some explanation, which would invisibly affect Zhao Xingye's actions, making Zhao Xingye have to think twice even if he wanted to change his mind. At that time, if I don't take advantage of the Qin clan, I will be looked down upon by this kid, and I will feel sorry for the help he lent me. But if I go, I'll be playing right into this brat's hands and following his heart. This is actually no different from using a borrowed knife to kill someone. It's just that this brat's intentions are very obscure and untraceable. This makes it very difficult for me to catch him. There was a trace of emotion on Zhao Xingye's beautiful and charming face. This means is really amazing. Not to mention his current cultivation and resources. He is good at using others to kill with a borrowed knife at such a young age. Very few people among his peers can compare with him. If such a black-hearted and extremely talented little monster grows up completely in the future, who will dare to provoke him? Zhang Sunlai was stunned. He really hadn't thought about this, but after thinking about it carefully, he found that what Zhao Xingye said was absolutely not exaggerated, and even pointed out some characteristics that the kid possessed on the first prick. Fortunately, even if he rises completely, he will not be the enemy of the Empire. Otherwise, this little guy will definitely become a peerless hero and bring disaster to the world. As Zhao Xingye said this, she had already stood up. Her black crane cloak outlined a soul-stirring graceful curve of her slender figure. Although Qin Chu's character is a bit unbearable, his words are not wrong. The resources left in the 8 camps of the Empire are limited. Under such circumstances, the period before the next passage to the Empire is opened will undoubtedly be the most difficult. There was a hint of contemplation between her white and smooth brows. Just like the storm that happened today, the sly Spirit King and the others led an army here. It seemed like their goal was to deal with that brat, but in reality, they just wanted to use this opportunity to start a large-scale war. Yes, if they use all their forces to fight during this period, the consequences will indeed be very serious. Zhang Sunlai frowned. As the leader of Camp No. 7, he naturally knew the seriousness of the current situation better than others. So, in order to resolve this crisis, the only way is to play a big game for them first. Zhao Xingye picked up the insignificant bow in her hand, and a pair of beautiful eyes stared at the blood-red bowstring. At this moment, an indescribable terrible power spread out from her body. In a trance, Zhang Sunlai's heart trembled as if he saw a boundless mountain of corpses and a sea of blood emerging. Zhao Xingye stood in it, and under her feet were endless piles of white bones. At this moment, Zhao Xingye had a kind of demeanor belonging to the bloodthirsty queen. This kind of momentum, in these years of battles and killings, had made the whole bloodthirsty battlefield tremble more than once. Chapter 742. Late at night. In Lin Sun's room, a Bai squatted on the ground, drinking bottle after bottle of liquor. She couldn't stop her tears from flowing down her face. She had been like this since Lin Sun told her about Hu Tong's death. She seemed to have lost her soul and looked very helpless. Lin Sun sat aside and watched her quietly, but his mood was quite complicated. Hu Tong was dead. His body was found on the battlefield. It had long been mutilated. His eyes, nose, heart, almost all parts of his body had been dug out by the enemy as trophies. He died too miserably. When Lin Sun found Hu Tong's body yesterday, he almost couldn't believe his eyes. A top figure in the reincarnation developing realm, a veteran overmatch who had been galloping in the bloodthirsty battlefield for 7 years, had died just like that. Lin Sun thought of the time when he drank with Hu Tong a few days ago. Hu Tong's heroic and hearty laughter seemed to ring in his ears again. In the end, Bai was still drunk. Lying on the ground, she mumbled some vague words. Even though her eyes were closed, tears still flowed down her cheeks. Lin Sun picked her up and put her on the bed. Then he sat on one side in a daze. A parting of life and death was undoubtedly the most painful thing in the world. And how many times had Bai experienced parting like today in the bloodthirsty battlefield all these years? When the news of the death of friends, comrades and companions came again and again, who could bear such a blow and sorrow? Lin soon remembered the first time he saw a Bai. It was late at night and she was kneeling on the ground alone, crying bitterly. The cruelest thing in the bloodthirsty battlefield is not the battle, but the blow and sorrow brought by death. Everyone may face death, and no one is sure who will die first. But as long as you are alive, you may have to face the bad news one by one. Perhaps only in the bloodthirsty battlefield can one deeply understand the feeling of this. Lin Sun's thoughts were flying. After a long time, he took a deep breath, and a touch of firmness flashed in his black eyes. One day, all this will change, the enemy will be destroyed, and Xiao Flower will never die. Lin Sun suddenly realized that perhaps Zhao Tai sent him to the bloodthirsty battlefield to let him witness all this. In the following days, the atmosphere in the bloodthirsty battlefield became tense. The army of the Voodoo barbarian tribe was dispatched frequently, whistling on the battlefield and becoming more active and combative than before. The Empire, on the other hand, tightened their defensive line and switched from offense to defense. Even so, the situation was still not optimistic. All of the Empire's Xiozhi knew that they didn't have many resources left. They could barely hold on until the next time the passage to the Empire opened. Under such circumstances, there was no way they could engage in a large-scale battle with the enemy. Otherwise, once there was a shortage of resources, the Empire would fall into internal strife and collapse before the enemy could even reach them. The Voodoo barbarian tribe seized this opportunity and began to attack frequently. They unscrupulously dispatched the army to give the Empire a heavy blow. The situation was dire. Even Lin Sun was deeply aware of this. In Camp 7, the number of casualties of the Empire's Xiozhi who had gone out to fight had increased dramatically. The shadow of death was like a haze, shrouding the hearts of every Empire's Xiozhi. The atmosphere in the camp became more and more gloomy and oppressive. There was no longer the liveliness of the past, and there was a somber and tense atmosphere everywhere. On this day, bloodthirsty battlefield, Silver Snow Ridge, kill. When an army of thousands of Voodoo barbarians passed by the Silver Snow Ridge, a vigorous figure suddenly rushed out, carrying a heavy sword, and directly rushed up. The army of Voodoo barbarians was shocked at first, and then burst into laughter. They all showed ferocious and disdainful expressions. A female practitioner of the Empire jumped out stupidly. It was not an ambush, but a suicide mission. The situation was really absurd. One person seemed too small and unbearable in the face of thousands of elite Voodoo barbarians. But it just so happened that she seemed to be fearless as she charged head-on. Her figure was vigorous like a strong and ruthless wind as she pressed forward courageously. Her millet hair was flying in the wind, and the heavy sword in her hand was wrapped in sharp killing intent. She was like a brave man who was going to fight to death alone, even if there were thousands of enemies. This person was shockingly a Bai. Puff, puff. As soon as they fought, 2 strong Voodoo barbarians were killed immediately, with blood bursting out. They were still shocked at the moment of death, as if they still couldn't believe that such a woman dared to fight with their army to death. The enemies were a little restless, and immediately became furious. They shouted and surrounded Abi like a tide, intending to wipe her out. Abi looked fearless, with a kind of almost numb calmness on her beautiful face. Only a pair of clear eyes were flashing with burning hatred. Kill! She gritted her teeth and rushed forward recklessly, as if she had forgotten about life and death. She just wanted to kill as many enemies as possible, leaving everything behind her. When a person no longer cared about life and death, he was either forced to the extreme or had no way to retreat. But Abi was different. She just wanted to kill the enemies. Her former comrades, friends, and companions all died one after another, which made her almost collapse, and her heart was filled with endless sorrow and hatred. Rather than living like this, it was better to die in killing the enemies. Kill! Blood was bursting out, and the roars of the enemies sounded one after another. Everything in front of her was dark red. Abi felt carefree. Although there had already been a lot of shocking scars on her body, and she was stained with blood, she felt very happy. It seemed that as long as she killed one more enemy, she could vent the sorrow and hatred in her heart, and let those dead comrades die in peace. However, she was only one person after all. Even though she was not afraid of life and death, she seemed too small and unbearable in the face of thousands of voodoo barbarian army. Just for a moment, she had been seriously injured and trapped there, like a cornered beast fighting, and might die at any time. But Abi didn't have any mood fluctuation at all, and still fought fiercely like a madman. Her resolute and fierce posture even surprised and moved those strong voodoo barbarians, and then they were furious. A woman dared to despise them like this. Kill. They were also completely enraged and attacked with all their strength. Ha ha ha, a group of bastards, even if I die today, I will drag you down with me. Abi was laughing and tears flowed out. The blood on her body was gurgling, and even her beautiful milk-colored long hair was dyed with blood. She was not crazy, and she knew that death was not far away. But so what? Yes, death was death. What was there to be afraid of? Swish! A snow-white bone spear swept over with fierce momentum, tearing the void and killing towards Abi with an unstoppable and terrifying momentum. Abi knew that she couldn't stop it, but she didn't step back. Instead, she rushed up fiercely, ignoring the possibility of being pierced in the chest, and slashed towards the owner of the bone spear with her sword. Life for life. Abi seemed to have been waiting for this moment for a long time, and she was so determined that there was no hesitation. However, the snow-white bone spear broke from the middle before it fell, and the head of the owner of the bone spear was thrown into the air. Too fast. It was so fast that Abi didn't have time to react, and the enemy had been killed. This Abi was stunned. Pooh! 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 A wave of muffled sounds rose and fell in the vicinity, and the enemies that besieged nearby were killed on the spot at almost the same moment. Streams of blood sprayed out and dyed the void red. In the blink of an eye, the area of 30 meters around Abi formed an empty area, and the ground was covered with corpses. It was also at this moment that Abi saw a broken blade that was jade white like snow and almost transparent. It was like a wisp of flowing light as it revolved and appeared in front of her, and it was suffused with a clear and holy silver brilliance. Go! A voice sounded in her ears, and Abi didn't have time to react before her arm was grabbed by someone and fled towards the distance. Why is it you again? Abi finally saw that familiar face clearly, but she wasn't moved at all. Instead, she was slightly annoyed and shouted, "Why did you save me? Do you care if I want to die? Even if you want to die, you can't die at the hands of the enemy." The person who came was Lin Sun. His expression was calm, and so was his voice, but it revealed an indisputable feeling. Abi was struggling, but how could she break free from Lin Sun's arm? Chase them. Behind them, a group of strong voodoo barbarians roared and were completely irritated. They were just a couple of shameless men and women, but they dared to ignore them. If they escaped, it would absolutely be a great shame. Kill. They were aggressive, like a tide, madly attacking. However, for Lin Sun, although this army of strong voodoo barbarians was large in number, almost all of them were at the level of voodoo barbarian strongman. Even their leader was just a strongman in the spirit awakening realm. In Lin Sun's eyes, this kind of power was not worth mentioning at all. Puff, 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 puff. The broken blade flew across the air, scattering dreamy brilliance and whistling back and forth in the void. At the same time, strong voodoo barbarians were killed on the spot one after another. It was too sharp. Controlled by Lin Sun's spiritual awareness, the broken blade appeared and disappeared like a ghost, vividly displaying the power of a magic weapon. In just a few breaths, dozens of strong voodoo barbarians were beheaded like paper paste. Lin Sun swept away the clouds like a whirlwind. Shrill screams and angry roars sounded in the field. Those strong voodoo barbarians were all shocked and couldn't believe it. They really couldn't imagine how a young man could be so terrible. He was just like the legendary young devil named Lin Shi. The only difference was that Lin Shi was good at archery, while the young man in front of them used a mysterious broken blade that could be described as horrible. No. That guy seems to be the legendary Lin Shi. Suddenly, the leader of the voodoo barbarian army seemed to realize something. His face suddenly changed and he cried out involuntarily. As soon as his words came out, the voodoo barbarian army became more restless, surprised and panicked. Lin Shi. How could it be him? Chapter 743. In a valley. Heavenly Sound Say Lin Sun was dressing Abi's wound. Abi stared at him blankly and suddenly asked, "Why did you save me?" "I just want to be free. It's too painful to live. I don't want to hear the bad news of my friends all the time in the future," Lin Sun said casually. "Whether it's revenge or to change all the pain you've suffered, there's only hope when you're alive." "Hope?" Abi smiled bitterly. "For thousands of years, the Empire and voodoo barbarian bastards have been fighting in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Who can change all this?" "It will change one day," Lin Sun said calmly. "Do you believe it?" Abi asked. Lin Sun looked into Abi's eyes seriously and said, "You know, for thousands of years, many practitioners of the Empire have fought here. If they had given up at that time, do you think the Empire would still have today's situation?" "Haha, I didn't expect you to be so considerate of the people of the Empire. I really underestimated your ambition before," Abi sneered. "I don't have such a noble consciousness." Lin Sun shrugged and then pondered. "I'm just like you. I don't want to see the pain you've gone through continue to live in the end," he sighed softly. "You're in pain, and so are the other generals and soldiers of the Empire. But who dares to give up easily? Do you still remember that saying, Xiao flower is invincible because of bloodthirsty, and the Empire survives because of wars?" Abi was silent for a moment. She patted her butt and stood up. There was a smile on her wild and beautiful face. "You are really not a good persuader. Do you think I will care if you discuss national affairs with a woman like me? At least, as long as you don't court death, I won't waste my efforts." Lin Sun also stood up and said casually, "I don't have many friends in the number 7 camp. If you die, the pain you're going through now will definitely fall on me. So, as a friend, I certainly won't watch you court death." Abi was stunned. Suddenly, she stretched out her arms silently and hugged Lin Sun tightly. After a long time, she murmured in a low voice, "Thank you, toy boy." Abi returned to normal from that day and no longer risked her life to fight as before. But Lin Sun was not happy at all. The situation in the bloodthirsty battlefield was becoming more and more turbulent and tense. Wind and rain were everywhere, and bad news could be heard from time to time in the camp. Old Huang went out to carry out a mission and met with trouble. One day, Lin Sun was about to go to Huang, the guard of the camp, when he heard such bad news from Lu Wenting. Lin Sun was stunned for a long time before he turned around and left silently. Another friend left. That night, Lin Sun drank a lot of wine alone and remembered the first time he drank with Huang in the pub. "My lord, do you know? I've been in this King bloodthirsty battlefield for 5 years. In these 5 years, I've changed my companions again and again. Familiar ones, unfamiliar ones. Until now, I've almost forgotten who I should remember. Everyone says that my life is tough and that it's a miracle that I haven't died in 5 years. However, I know that I'm just King afraid of death. That's why every time I fight, I do everything I can to prevent myself from dying. That's why I'm lucky enough to survive until now, but it's too painful to live like this." Every day when he woke up, his first thought was how to survive the day. Who the CK cares about the future? Alas, I can't help it. This is bloodthirsty battlefield. Death happens all the time. Maybe one day I will also. Huang's drunken voice seemed to be still in Lin Sun's ears, but he had already left. In the night, a sigh came from Lin Sun's room. Old Huang, UF** King Jinx. Early the next morning, Lin Sun left the camp. Bloodthirsty battlefield, bloodthirsty battlefield. A team of hundreds of voodoo barbarians was on the road. Although the team was small in number, each one of them was an elite, with 5 Spirit Awakening Realm practitioners in charge. Their target was a team of casual practitioners in the number 6 camp of the Empire. Stop! Suddenly, a leading Spirit Awakening Realm practitioner narrowed his eyes and saw a figure standing on the road in the distance. It was a young man in a moon-white robe, with long black hair hanging down to his waist. With his hands behind his back, he stared at the distant sky in a daze, as if he was in a daze. Bloodthirsty battlefield had long been an area of constant bloodshed. Voodoo barbarians and imperial practitioners had carried out countless bloody battles here. But today, there was a young man standing there all by himself with a casual bearing. This was too abnormal. The leader of this team of voodoo barbarians was a ruthless man from the fire barbarian branch. His name was Yen Jioga, who was very knowledgeable and experienced. He saw something wrong at a glance. Be careful, everyone. A strong uneasiness surged in Yen Jioga's heart. He made a prompt decision to stop the team. Sir, it's just a young man of the human tribe. We can kill him easily. What are you worried about? A voodoo barbarian muttered. What do you know? Yen Jioga scolded and looked more dignified. He always felt that the young man in the distance was a little familiar, but he couldn't remember. Humph, if Lin Shire came, we would have to be ready for him. But this guy doesn't even have a bow in his hand. That voodoo barbarian still didn't take it seriously. But his words were like a thunderbolt, which made Yen Jioga's face change greatly. He finally remembered why he felt that the young man in the distance was a little familiar. This guy looked almost the same as Lin Shire in the legend. The only difference was that he didn't have the famous white bone bow and a dark and terrible arrow. Damn, retreat! Yen Jioga roared. He was sure that the young man must be Lin Shire. Even if the latter didn't carry a bow this time, his terrible reputation frightened Yen Jioga. What was more, a person like Lin Shire dared to come here alone. How could he come to die? The more Yen Jioga thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Sir, what's wrong with you? Retreat? Why should I retreat? Seeing Yen Jioga's strong reaction, the other voodoo barbarians in this team were a little stunned. They didn't understand how big a threat a young man could be. But Yen Jioga had already fled. Like a gust of wind, he ran and shouted angrily, "A bunch of idiots, that guy is Lin Shire. Are you waiting to die?" His voice echoed like thunder. All of a sudden, all the voodoo barbarians in this team were dumbfounded. That guy was really Lin Shire? Run! Sensing that something was wrong, these voodoo barbarians didn't fight, but fled immediately. They couldn't help it. Lin Shire was now synonymous with young demon god in the voodoo barbarian camp. He was absolutely notorious. Rumors about him could even make life and death realm kings restless. Under such circumstances, who dared to stay? However, although they reacted quickly, it was too late. A thunderous roar suddenly resounded in this world. Chapter 744. Roar. The roar was so powerful that it resounded beyond the clouds in the 9th heaven. Even Wenting was shocked and started to count them in person. Damn it, this guy is not going to fight. He is going to sweep the place alone. While counting, Lu Wenting swore, but his eyebrows were full of shock and joy. For many days, the atmosphere in the camp of the Empire had been gloomy, tense, and solemn. What Lin Sun did today would definitely have an excellent effect on boosting the morale of the camp. On the same night, Lin Sun's military merits were counted out, which shocked all the practitioners of the Empire in the camp. A total of 29 first-class military merit. And Lin Sun's name also jumped to the 9th place on the military merits list of Camp 7. It should be noted that the military merits of the top 100 had been accumulated for many years. It was not easy for them to obtain a place on this list that represented honor. But Lin Sun had just been in the camp for less than half a year, but his accumulated military merits soared to the 9th place with a stunning exaggeration. Of course, the military merits he got from killing the half-step spirit beasts were also counted. The practitioners of Camp 7 were all excited, their morale greatly boosted, and their admiration for Lin Sun reached an unprecedented level. Until late at night, even the practitioners in the other 7 camps of the Empire also knew Lin Sun's heaven-defying record, which set off an uproar for a while. In the camp of voodoo barbarians, the atmosphere was particularly gloomy, because Lin Sun's feat today had shocked many voodoo barbarian kings. Chapter 745. The 3rd place on the blood list. When the Imperial camp heard the news, they were completely shocked. No one expected that a young man in Tao Insight realm would become the 3rd most dangerous person in the voodoo barbarian camp. In the thousands of years of war, there had never been such an example. Child Lin is too fierce. They put Child Lin's name in the 3rd place on the blood list. Voodoo barbarian tribe is obviously anxious. All kinds of exclamations sounded in the 8 camps of the Empire. Lin Sun's fierce record boosted the morale of the Empire camp and swept away the previous haze. However, there were also people who were worried about Lin Sun. Dolua Continent 3 Dragon King Legend, the 3rd place on the blood list. It seemed to be a very different kind of glory, but this ranking would bring great danger and trouble to Lin Sun. How could they let it go after killing so many strong barbarians in the voodoo barbarian camp? In fact, Lin Sun's situation did become dangerous. In the next few days, some dangerous variables began to appear in his campaign on the battlefield. Gu Hongshan, bloodthirsty battlefield. Whoosh! Lin Sun was escaping. His figure turned into an ice puppet, and his speed was extremely fast. Without that pair of bows and arrows, you are just SOSO. Behind him, a powerful thunder barbarian was chasing him. He was strong, with a beard like a halberd. When he opened and closed his eyes, the lightning was flowing, which was extremely frightening. This was a half-step king named Shi Nanming from Thunder Barbarian Branch. There was originally a team of Thunder Barbarians stationed in Gu Hongshan. According to the information, the strongest in this team was only a strong practitioner in Spirit Awakening realm. However, what caught Lin Sun off guard was that when he arrived at Gu Hongshan, this team of Thunder Barbarians had already retreated and was empty. Only Shi Nanming, a half-step king, was waiting. Obviously, Shi Nanming came here to kill Lin Sun. Ha! Lin Shire also has this day? I'm not afraid to tell you that this time, there are 5 other half-step king and a real barbarian king. The only goal is to kill you, little bastard. Shi Nanming smiled. His voice was cold and filled with killing intent. Lin Shire was only at the Tao Insight realm, but he had brought too many blows and shadows to the voodoo barbarian tribe these days. If he was not killed, it would be a great shame for the voodoo barbarian tribe. Barbarian king? Lin Sun, who was fleeing in the distance, suddenly narrowed his eyes. Sending a king and 6 half-step kings to deal with him? How extravagant! Die! Suddenly, Shi Nanming shouted and threw out a long spear condensed from thunder and lightning. The spear swept across the sky towards Lin Sun. It was unbelievably fast. In the depths of the mulberry forest, Lin Sun had also been hunted like this. But at that time, with the bloody mist that isolated perception and the threat of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, Lin Sun was able to escape without any danger. But now it was different. In the vast world, there was almost no place for Lin to hide. Therefore, even though Lin Sun had exerted Ice Drake steps with all his strength, he was still caught up with. Boom! The thunder and lightning spear was terrible. Wrapped with dazzling lightning, it smashed the void into pieces, which looked extremely terrible. Lin Sun dodged. With a bang, the thunder and lightning spear blasted a huge hole in the nearby ground, which was shocking. After this, Shi Nanming had caught up with him and said with a creepy smile, "Little guy, why don't you run away? I'd like to know how powerful you are without that pair of bows and arrows." As he spoke, he had already launched his killing move. With a wave of his sleeve, the thunder and lightning arcs rushed out and turned into spears, pressing down on Lin Sun. It was really too terrible. If it were another strong man, even a practitioner of reincarnation development realm, let alone Tao insight realm, would not be able to resist it. Although Lin Sun was confident, he also knew that without the help of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, it was almost impossible to defeat a half-step king. Whoosh, whoosh. Lin Sun's figure began to flash, constantly dodging, but he looked a little embarrassed. How could the frontal attack of a half-step king be ordinary? Shi Nanming's divine power was like the sea, and there was a terrible power of thunder and lightning around him. He was like the master of this world, pointing at the sky and hitting the earth, vividly displaying the power of a half-step king. Lin Sun's pressure doubled. If he just dodged, with the magic of ice drake steps, he would not be afraid of this kind of attack, but this was obviously impossible. The divine power of a half-step king was too strong, and he controlled the mystery of the Great Way. This world seemed to have become his absolute domain. Even if Lin Sun dodged, his whole body was under extremely terrible pressure. He was like a fish struggling in the ice, and would be frozen at any time. This world was turbulent, and thunder and lightning arcs were pouring down like dense rain, full of terrible destructive breath. Rocks were exploding, the earth was cracking, and the void was in disorder. Everything seemed to be turbulent and chaotic. Shi Nanming was like a thunder god, and his divine power was like the sun and the moon, which was extremely powerful. Lin Sun could only try his best to dodge, and the situation was dangerous. Strictly speaking, this should be the first time for Lin Sun to fight against a half-step king without the help of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow. Although Lin Sun had many experiences of killing half-step kings in the past, it was not until this time that he deeply realized the gap between Tao Insight Realm and half-step king. This gap was like a natural moat, which could not be made up by pure cultivation. Even if Lin Sun had set foot on the top of the Tao path and could be called invincible in Tao Insight Realm, he still could not make it. Of course, this referred to a pure competition of cultivation, which could not represent everything. Lin Shurer, you also have such a day. Shi Nanming was very excited, and his eyes were full of killing intent. Such a young man, who ranked third on the blood list and had brought many blows and shadows to the voodoo barbarian camp, was going to die in his hands today, which made Shi Nanming feel a great sense of satisfaction. He believed that if he killed Lin Sun today, he would be the most eye-catching half-step king in the entire voodoo barbarian camp. Boom! Shi Nanming became more and more violent. Thunderstorms swept across the sky, pouring down like a waterfall, so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. Go to hell! Shi Nanming roared fiercely, controlling the rolling thunder waves to cover Lin Sun. He had seen that Lin Sun could not hold on any longer. Whoosh! But at this moment a nearly transparent blade suddenly appeared, and with a swish, the thunder all over the sky was cut in half. The scene was really incredible. The thunderstorm was like a waterfall, but at this moment it was easily cut in half like a piece of cloth. This sudden scene caught Shi Nanming off guard, and his expression changed abruptly. Almost at the same time, an earth-shaking roar resounded like a dragon's roar, and the sound wave made Shi Nanming's soul tremble as if he was hit by a giant hammer. His mighty figure suddenly froze in the void, staggered, and almost fell down from the air. Swish! Before Shi Nanming could react, the nearly transparent blade had shot to him. It was too fast, so fast that Shi Nanming's hair stood on end, and he felt a fatal threat. It had to be said that as a half-step king, Shi Nanming was really too powerful, and his reaction was extremely fast. At this critical moment, his figure twisted strangely, and he narrowly avoided this fatal blow. However, a wound that was around an inch deep had been torn open on his neck, and fresh blood sprayed out and gurgled out. Just a little bit more and his throat would have been severed. This caused Shi Nanming to break out in a cold sweat. His face instantly became ashen, and he went mad with hatred. In this battle where victory was within his grasp, he had almost been killed. "You're courting death!" Shi Nanming roared angrily, which made the world tremble. But at this moment, Lin Sun had already escaped. Lin Sun sighed in his heart that he failed to kill Shi Nanming. Although the broken blade had transformed into a magic weapon, because his cultivation was too low, the limit of the power he exerted could barely hurt a half-step king. Moreover, this was in the case of a sneak attack. As for the Paleo's roar, it might be able to greatly affect the strongmen at the level of reincarnation development realm, but its power was obviously limited for a half-step king. Lin Sun had to choose to escape. Whoosh! His figure was like an ice puppet shuttling through the void, and his speed had reached the limit. But behind him, Shi Nanming's extremely angry roar still came, and the voice was getting closer and closer. Obviously, the enraged half-step king was catching up with him. This guy is on guard. Even if I use the broken blade this time, I'm afraid it will be difficult to hurt him. Unfortunately, I don't have insignificance bow. Otherwise, I won't be so embarrassed. I can kill this old beast directly with an arrow while escaping. Lin Sun suddenly remembered that it had been nearly 8 days since he lent the insignificance bow and the blue sky arrow to bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingyan. But in these 8 days, he didn't hear any movement about her, which seemed a little strange. Could it be that she was waiting for a satisfying prey? Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart suddenly trembled, and he felt an indescribable sense of palpitating danger. In an instant, his face changed. An extremely mighty figure had suddenly appeared on the path ahead. The figure was enveloped in bright golden divine radiance, and it was like a divine sun that illuminated the heavens and the earth. A king. And it was obvious that he came from the golden barbarian branch. Lin Sun finally dared to confirm that what Shi Nanming said before was true. This time, the voodoo barbarian tribe sent a real king to deal with Lin Sun. All of a sudden, Lin Sun's situation became precarious. It was really difficult for him to advance or retreat, just like a desperate situation. "Little bastard, why don't you run away?" Shi Nanming's cold and angry shout came from behind. He also saw the majestic and dazzling figure, golden like a god, standing between heaven and earth, like a king overlooking all living beings. Chapter 746. The reason why Shi Nanming was angry was that he should be the one to kill Lin Sun, but now it was obviously impossible. Sounds of nature. The dazzling, majestic king that appeared in the distance was called Jin Chaosui. He was an old monster that had lived for thousands of years. Among the barbarian kings in the voodoo barbarian camp, Jin Chaosui was also one of the best. Only a few old monsters, such as Dark Barbarian Ghost King, Thunder Barbarian King and Thunder Barbarian King, could compete with him. Now Jin Chaosui appeared. Without thinking, Shi Nanming knew that the credit of killing Lin Shire would not fall on him. "Little bastard, it's your blessing to die in the hands of Lord Jin." Shi Nanming's voice revealed a trace of unwillingness. But Lin Sun's expression at the moment seemed a little strange. When he first glimpsed Jin Chaosui, he was still frightened and shocked. But just for a moment, he calmed down. This seemed a little abnormal. Shi Nanming also noticed this scene and couldn't help thinking angrily that Lin Sun was unwilling to accept his fate when facing him just now. Yet now, when faced with a king, he directly admitted defeat, and it seemed as if he was resigned to his fate and was waiting to be captured. Such a comparison was too infuriating. "Little bastard, do you just accept your fate like this? I'm very surprised. It's said that you are bold and fearless, isn't it?" Shi Nanming's unwillingness and anger turned into ridicule and vented from his mouth. "It turns out that you are just a guy who bullies the weak and fears the strong. It's really disappointing." "Don't be disappointed." At this time, Lin Sun's lips curved into an unfathomable smile. "Believe me, you will be satisfied later. What? Shi Nanming was stunned and then flew into a rage. Lin Sun had obviously admitted defeat, but he was still not afraid of him at all. Did he have no sense of existence as a half-step king in Lin Sun's eyes? Shi Nanming felt that his dignity was hurt and his face was very embarrassed. However, when he was about to teach Lin a hard lesson, his eyes suddenly widened and almost fell out of his eye sockets. His face became dull in an instant as if he had been struck by lightning. In the extreme distance, the body of the king of the gold barbarians, Jin Chaos Wei, that was originally standing proudly like a brilliant sun, had actually collapsed inch by inch, and his flesh and blood rustled as they fell. This scene was far too thrilling. An extremely terrifying old freak at the king realm had died without making a single sound, and he hadn't even said a single word? Shi Nanming was not a greenhorn who had never seen the world. As a half-step king, he had seen all kinds of death scenes in his life. However, when he saw the scene before him, he still felt his scalp go numb and his soul leave his body. Jin Chaos Wei. This was a terrifying ancestor of the Golden Barbarians. Rumor had it that he had begun to explore the mystery of the 9 tribulations of longevity. But now, he had died without a sound? Shi Nanming almost thought that he was seeing things, and he was utterly unable to maintain his composure. His mind was in chaos, and his entire body felt cold. How could it be? How could it be? Shi Nanming looked dull and in a trance. Lin Sun, on the other hand, seemed to be much calmer. At first, he was also shocked, but soon he noticed the clues. When Jin Chaos Wei died without a sound, he was completely sure that the king of the Golden Barbarians had been killed long before he came. And it was the arrow of blue sky that killed him. Lin Sun was too familiar with the breath of the arrow of blue sky. How could he not guess that the first female general of the empire, Zhao Xingye, who had the title of Bloodthirsty Queen, was nearby? This was also the reason why Lin Sun could remain calm and composed. Now, you won't be disappointed, will you? Lin Sun turned his head and saw the dull and shocked expression on Shi Nanming's face. He couldn't help but think that this old guy must have been scared out of his wit. Shi Nanming swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His face changed dramatically, and he realized that something was wrong. As he spoke, he turned around and fled. It was too scary. A king had died just like that. As a half-step Shi Nanming, how could he dare to stay any longer? However, he was still very perplexed in his heart. How could a king like Jin Chaos Wei possibly die silently like this? In the bloodthirsty battlefield, who could kill a king so easily? Could it be that some horrible creature in the depths of the mulberry forest had come out? The more Shi Nanming thought about it, the more uneasy and scared he became. No! He suddenly remembered something. Just a few days ago, when the Ghost Spirit King and the other 3 kings led an army to attack the 7th camp of the Empire, a similar thing happened. At that time, Zhang Sunlai of the 7th camp killed Green Soul King with a pair of terrifying bows and arrows. The Ghost Spirit King and the others were so frightened that they retreated and fled before the battle began. Could it be? Shi Nanming's heart trembled. Could it be that there is another king of the empire lying in ambush nearby, holding a pair of bows and arrows that belonged to Lin Shi? Undeniably, as a half-step Shi Nanming's experience and reaction were excellent. After a little analysis, he guessed an answer close to the truth. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to react at this time. On his way to escape, a woman appeared out of nowhere. An extremely beautiful woman. Dressed in a black crane cloak, she was tall, slender, and upright. Her black hair fell down like a waterfall, revealing a beautiful face that could bring disaster to a country and people. Her eyes were dark and bright, her lips were red and moist, and her skin was smoother and more delicate than mutton-fat jade. She was breathtakingly beautiful. However, at the first sight of this woman, Shi Nanming completely collapsed. As if he had seen a devil queen from hell, his whole face turned ashen as if he had lost his parents. Bloodthirsty queen. It was her. This was the last thought of Shi Nanming before he died, with endless despair and helplessness. At this time, Lin Sun had already caught up with Zhao Xingye. You be the bait and I will kill the enemies. Let's try to kill more barbarians. After a little greeting, Zhao Xingye made a suggestion. Lin Sun was stunned. Can it work? Don't belittle yourself. You are much more famous than me now. Voodoo barbarians hate you so much that they send barbarians to hunt you down. Under such circumstances, you are undoubtedly the most suitable person to take on this great responsibility. Zhao Xingye smiled charmingly. Her posture was straight and graceful. She had a unique temperament that was a combination of grace, beauty, sternness, and charm. She had a myriad of amorous feelings and a majesty that no one dared to blaspheme. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. It was the first time for him to hear such an unconventional compliment. It was absolutely the first time for him to be hunted down as a skill. But in the end, Lin Sun agreed. In the following time, Lin Sun no longer hid himself, nor was he cautious. He directly rushed along the battlefield to the enemy's base camp. Along the way, many strong barbarians were alarmed and almost couldn't believe their eyes. Wasn't Lin Shi afraid of death? Didn't he know that a real barbarian king was hunting him down? He was so arrogant. Those strong barbarians were all angry. They thought it was a blatant provocation. Lin Sun regarded them as nothing and was extremely arrogant. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to them. When he met some weak enemies, he directly chopped them down. As for some weaker opponents, he didn't bother to hunt them down. He let them run away so that they could inform others. What made Lin Sun feel a little pity was that he didn't meet any real barbarians along the way, not even a half-step king. It's nothing more than a fox assuming the tiger's might, isn't it? Thinking of his behavior at this time, Lin Sun couldn't help but look a little strange. But how to put it, it was really cool. At this moment, Lin Sun wished he could be in the Forbidden City. In this case, he could directly kill the Zhou family and the Qin family. With Zhao Xingye, the bloodthirsty queen, following him, wouldn't he be able to kill anyone who stood in his way? Of course, this was an illusion after all. It was unrealistic. Lin Sun soon laughed and shook his head to stop thinking about it. Report. Lin Shi is coming to our camp alone. He is too arrogant. This guy doesn't take us seriously at all. If we don't eradicate him, how can we, the barbarians, save our face? In the camp of voodoo barbarians, the news was quickly sent back, which caused a great sensation and made the faces of those strong voodoo barbarians turn green with anger. What was going too far? That was it. A young man in the Tao Insight realm dared to act so arrogantly in their territory alone. This was too arrogant. Good. I was worried that I didn't have a chance to kill him. I didn't expect that he would take the initiative to seek death. Let's go and kill him. Soon, strong voodoo barbarians left the camp angrily, ready to kill Lin Sun with a strong murderous intent. However, they didn't lose their heads because of anger. Almost all the barbarians were above the spirit awakening realm, and many of them were in the half-step king realm. Haha, the younger generation will surpass us in time. I'd like to see what this guy is capable of. How dare he come here alone to provoke us? Be careful. It doesn't matter. This is the territory of our barbarians. Even if there is a trick, we can't tolerate a young guy coming here. In the end, even a barbarian king couldn't sit still. He left the camp with a stern face. At the same time, in an area thousands of miles away from the barbarian camp, Lin Sun was standing on the top of a mountain, overlooking some barbarians coming from afar. With his hands behind his back and a calm look, he said leisurely, "I've killed so many barbarians like you these days. I'm tired of you. Go, go, go. Call your masters to come here to die. I don't want to waste any more energy on you." His words were light, but every word resounded clearly between heaven and earth. The undisguised sarcasm and contempt in his words made those strong voodoo barbarians stamping with rage and their lungs almost explode. Search for CM or enter the website sad face. Chapter 747. Lin Sun's words were full of sarcasm and contempt, but his words were casual and his expression was calm, which was too abominable in the eyes of the voodoo barbarians. Heavenly voice 2-inch human puppy, your king tired of living, huh? Why don't you get down here and die? A bad-tempered fire barbarian shouted. Other voodoo barbarians also looked gloomy, with killing intent in their eyes. Lin Shire, this human teenager who had risen like a comet, had brought too many shadows and blows to the barbarian camp these days. Originally, this was already a great shame. Who would have thought that before they could take revenge, this young man took the initiative to come here? Moreover, he was so arrogant that he didn't put them in his eyes at all, which was too hateful. What are you shouting for? Get up here and die if you have the guts, and keep quiet if you don't. Lin Sun stood on the top of the lonely mountain, overlooking more and more voodoo barbarians gathering in the distance, still with an irreverent and disdainful look. You are courting death. The fire barbarian flew into a rage. If he didn't do anything when someone came to provoke him, it would be really humiliating. Boom. He stamped on the ground and suddenly rose into the air. He swung his arm and threw a white bone flywheel surrounded by flames toward the mountain where Lin Sun was standing. Other voodoo barbarians narrowed their eyes and watched closely. Although they were provoked, they still kept calm and vaguely felt that there was something wrong with what happened today. Although a young man in Tao Insight realm had made a great name for himself in the past, he dared to come to their territory alone to provoke them. What was the difference between this and walking into a trap? Was this young man an idiot? Obviously not. Then, there was something wrong with his way of doing things. You are courting death. On the mountain, Lin Sun sneered. He didn't move, but a bright and transparent blade suddenly swept out, like a flying spirit saber, holy and dreamy. Crack! The white bone flywheel was cut in half in an instant and burst into a rain of light. Whoosh! At the same time, the bright blade flashed gently in the void. With a puff, the throat of the fire barbarian who rose into the air was cut in an instant. It was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he had cut down a spirit awakener as if he were cutting vegetables and melons. Those voodoo barbarians who had been paying close attention were shocked in their hearts, and their pupils dilated. Walla, scarlet blood spurted out from the dead fire barbarian's throat, like a violent waterfall, poignant and horrifying. Previously, those barbarians were still angry, thinking that it was a shame to be provoked by Lin Sun alone. But now their hearts went cold, shocked by this scene. They had long known that the reason why Lin Sun could kill half-step kings consecutively before was because of a pair of terrifying bows and arrows of mysterious origin. In other words, if it weren't for this pair of bows and arrows, they would not be afraid of Lin Sun at all. However, the scene that unfolded before their eyes overturned their thoughts and caught them off guard. Without the help of that pair of bows and arrows, Lin Shire was still able to kill a spirit awakener on their side with one blow. That would be too shocking. The scene was silent for a while. Fortunately, most of the voodoo barbarians present were above the spirit awakening realm, and many of them were half-step kings. If it was any other expert, they would have probably been terrified by this strike to the point their will to fight collapsed, and they would have fled in panic. Even so, the faces of these voodoo barbarians present were still gloomy and ugly. Each of them could be regarded as a leading figure in the voodoo barbarian camp, and belonged to the mainstay. Although they couldn't compare with the old monsters in the king realm, they could be called big shots. But now, with so many big shots together, instead of frightening the opponent, one of their companions was easily killed by the opponent under their eyes. How could they not be angry? Look, I told you that you couldn't do it, but you jumped out to die. Who can you blame? On the top of the mountain, Lin Sun sighed lightly. With his hands behind his back, his figure was tall and handsome. His clothes fluttered in the wind, giving him a kind of ethereal air. but his posture made those voodoo barbarians feel more disgusting and arrogant. "Little guy, this is the territory of voodoo barbarian camp. I'm really curious. Who gave you the courage to come here alone to offend us?" A half-step king stepped out with a cold look. He was from the wood barbarian named Ching He. This was what all the voodoo barbarians felt wrong. If it weren't so, how could they stay still like now? They would have rushed out to besiege Lin Sun. Lin Sun squinted at Ching He and said, "Old guy, you'd better back off. You are not qualified to talk to me." Arrogant. As soon as Lin Sun said this, Ching He and other half-step kings were so angry that their eyelids twitched and their killing intent showed. They couldn't wait to slap the little bastard standing on the top of the mountain and talking nonsense. Other voodoo barbarians were also furious. Even half-step kings were not qualified? This guy was really arrogant. At this time, Ching He was so angry that he laughed. "I don't care what you are thinking. Since you are here today, stay here for me." Boom. He stepped out with eyes as sharp as a blade. His skinny figure was full of a horrible breath. The invisible killing intent covered the world like a tide. At the same time, another 3 half-step kings also stood out and approached Lin Sun from different directions with unfriendly looks. They seemed to be very cautious and careful. They believed that Lin Sun didn't come here to die on purpose. He must have other plans. Therefore, even though they were dealing with Lin Sun, a young man in Tao Insight Realm, they not only seemed to be very cautious, but also sent out 4 half-step kings at one time. If this news spread out, it would definitely shock everyone. Who had ever seen such a thing in the past to use such a lineup to deal with a young man in Tao Insight Realm? On the mountain peak, Lin Sun watched quietly with a strange color in his eyes. He was a little dissatisfied in his heart. Why didn't the king of voodoo barbarians show up at this time? When Lin Sun just thought of this, he heard a boom, and there was a great turbulence between heaven and earth. It was like the surging of wind and thunder, more like the roar of gods and demons. The horrible power made all the voodoo barbarians change their expressions. Sure enough, there was a conspiracy. Ching He and the other 3 half-step kings who attacked together stopped almost at the same time. They sneered in their hearts. They guessed right. Lin Sun dared to come here alone because he had other plans. However, soon their expressions changed, and they were so shocked that their souls almost flew out. In their sight, a black light like a peerlessly sharp blade suddenly burst out at an incredible speed. The void was torn into pieces and turned into turbulence, with sharp and harsh whines. The world fell into a great turbulence like a collapse. It was like a box that was severely penetrated, crushed, and about to collapse and burst into pieces by the black light. It was terrible. In a trance, they could even see a magnificent figure in the distance, stepping on the sun, the moon, and the stars, and bending the bow to move the universe. There was no doubt that the black light was a divine arrow that was shot out. But because its fierce power was so terrible, it caused many strange phenomena full of destructive breath to appear. Damn it! Ching He and other half-step kings, as well as the voodoo barbarians present, were completely shocked at this moment. They were like falling into an ice cave. Under such monstrous power, they couldn't have any thoughts of resistance or evasion, and they couldn't stop it at all. What kind of arrow was this? It seemed to be able to amaze time and time, penetrate the barrier of time and space, and make all the stars in the sky dim and fall into oblivion. However, what made all of them confused was that this black divine arrow was not aimed at them, but flashed in the void and swept in the direction behind them. The terrible speed and power, just the sound made by cutting through the void, made those voodoo barbarians feel dizzy. Their souls were about to split, and their blood was surging. But they didn't care about this. Almost at the same time, they all turned their heads. Who on earth was such a stunning arrow aimed at? Boom! In the blink of an eye, when these voodoo barbarians just thought of this, they saw a terrible explosion in the distance behind them. It was like hundreds of thousands of volcanoes erupting there, spewing out billowing mushroom-shaped blazing airflow, rushing to the sky, evaporating the clouds, and the void seemed to be burned into a black hole. And in this shocking explosion, there was a figure roaring in it, and the sound resounded through the world. It was a kind of mournful scream before death, revealing endless anger, panic, unwillingness, and even an indescribable frustration. It seemed that he didn't expect that he would be shot to death like this. The world was shaking, the airflow was disordered, and the sand and stones were flying. Even though they were far away, those voodoo barbarians in the field were still shocked and stunned. Their legs were trembling, and they were about to collapse completely. Flame King! There was no need to guess at all. These voodoo barbarians recognized that the dead figure was Flame King, the old monster of the fire barbarian branch. When he was in the mulberry forest, Flame King was seriously injured, but after all, he survived. After a period of rest, his injury had mostly healed. But he never thought that he could escape from the massacre in the mulberry forest, but failed to escape this terrible arrow and was obliterated on the spot. Anyway, he was a king after all. How could he die like this? The whole field was silent and everyone was shocked there. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. He had seen many scenes of kings dying since he started his cultivation, but every time he saw it, he still couldn't calm down. After all, the terrifying existence of kings, whether in the empire or in the voodoo barbarian tribe, was like a pillar of the sea. They were few in number, and killing one would mean one less king. But Lin soon calculated that, leaving aside King Jin Pe, who died in the mulberry forest, 3 kings of the voodoo barbarian tribe had died in this period of time. Green Soul King was killed by Zhang Sunlai. Jin Chaos Wei and Flame King in front of him were killed by Zhao Xingye. The death of 3 kings at once was definitely an unexpected heavy blow to the voodoo barbarian camp. Perhaps only in this way can the dangerous situation facing the Empire camp be resolved. At this moment, Lin Sun completely understood why Zhao Xingye borrowed the insignificant spiritual bow and sky arrow. Chapter 748. Amidst the deathly silent atmosphere, Zhao Xingye's graceful and straight figure appeared. Her beautiful eyes were as deep as the sea. As she glanced around, an indescribable pressure spread out. Bloodthirsty queen! When they recognized Zhao Xingye's identity, Qin He and other barbarians' hearts sank to the bottom and their faces turned pale. They finally understood why Lin Sun was so fearless and why the arrow just now had such amazing and terrifying power. Everything was because of this woman, a dangerous woman who had been feared by the barbarians for thousands of years. They were convinced that even in a head-on confrontation, King Yanqiong was no match for this woman. Go back and tell King Guzhen that in the next period of time, if any king dares to make trouble in the camp of the Empire, don't blame me for giving him a tooth for a tooth. To everyone's surprise, Zhao Xingye did not continue to kill. After saying this, she turned around and left with Lin Sun. She killed the barbarian with 1 arrow, and then left after saying this. Qin He and the others watched Zhao Xingye and Lin Sun leave, but none of them dared to stop them. They didn't even dare to speak. The atmosphere was deathly silent. On the same day, in the camp of voodoo barbarians, in one of the tents, a stooped old man dressed in animal skin with sparse hair and an extremely old appearance was similarly silent when he heard Zhao Xingye's warning. After a long time, he sighed softly and said in a hoarse and low voice, "What a pair of fierce bows and arrows! Zhao Xingye." In the tent, there were also top barbarians of the voodoo barbarian tribe. The weakest barbarian had the cultivation of half-step king, and there were many old monsters in the king realm. However, they all looked very gloomy at this time. Especially when they heard the sigh of the skinny old man, their faces became gloomier and gloomier. In one day, Jin Chaos Wei, the king of the gold barbarian tribe, and King Yanqiong, the king of the fire barbarian tribe, were killed by the same woman. Such a heavy blow had never happened before. I originally thought that before the calamity of the Grand Tao descended, It would be sufficient for us to seize this opportunity to annihilate the camp of the empires in one go and complete something that hasn't been accomplished for a few thousands of years. Who would have imagined that such a variable would actually appear? The old man's expression was neither sad nor happy, and his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life. He said in a light voice, "It's really quite a pity." One of the kings frowned and said angrily, "If it weren't for the sudden appearance of Lin Shi and the bow in his hand, how could this have happened?" When the big shots heard the name Lin Shi, they all frowned, and a murderous intent rose in their hearts. He was only a young man, yet he'd stirred up a storm after making an appearance in the bloodthirsty battlefield, causing them to be badly battered and suffering setbacks repeatedly. This seemed to be too inconceivable and infuriating. What's the point of complaining now? The old man sitting at the head of the table seemed to have come to terms with it. He appeared abnormally calm. "Ever since the great opportunity appeared in the mulberry forest, our clan has already lost 4 kings. We can't go on like this." Do you really want to compromise with Zhao Xingye? All the big shots were shocked. This woman has always been bloodthirsty, and now she has a peerless treasure in her hand. If we continue to fight against her, even if we try our best, we will only end up with a lose-lose result. The old man stood up shakily and walked out of the tent with his back hunched. "Give the order that from today on, we shall cease all activities and make a truce with the enemy." As he spoke, he had already left. However, even though he'd already left, the light words he left behind were like 1,000 kilograms that pressed down on the hearts of every single great figure in the tent, causing them to have no choice but to accept it even though they were extremely depressed and furious in their hearts. Because this old man was King Guzhen, an old monster at the dominating level of the voodoo barbarian camp. His words were like a decree, and no one dared to disobey. On this day, bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye launched a powerful attack and killed 2 voodoo barbarian kings, forcing King Guzhen to agree to a truce. When the news spread to the 8 camps of the empire, it immediately caused a great sensation, which made every practitioner of the empire extremely excited and joyful. During this period, the voodoo barbarian army frequently attacked the camp of the empire, making the situation tense and depressing. It could be said that everyone was in danger. Everyone had to worry that if a full-scale war broke out, the remaining materials could not support the camp of the empire to the end. But now all this was no longer a problem. How could it not be exciting and joyful? The gloomy and depressing atmosphere in the camp of the empire in recent days was also swept away, and the camp became lively again. General Zhao is so amazing. She killed 2 voodoo barbarian kings alone and forced King Guzhen to lower his head. Such divine power is enough to shine as bright as the sun and the moon. Many practitioners of the empire were cheering for Zhao Xingye, and their admiration for her even reached the point of fanaticism. As far as I know, General Zhao could win this time thanks to the help of the 12th young Master Lin. Is there such a thing? I'm not afraid to tell you that when General Zhao killed the 2 voodoo barbarian kings, she relied on the pair of bows and arrows in Child Lin's hands. Yes, according to the intelligence from the scouts in the front line, King Guzhen seemed to be extremely afraid of this pair of bows and arrows, so he had to make the decision to stop the war. I see. In this case, Child Lin also has a share of this credit. Similarly, the news that Lin Sun generously lent bows and arrows also spread like wildfire and became a good story for a while. Practitioners of the empire all praised Lin Sun for serving the public wholeheartedly and being righteous. He was absolutely a model of their generation and the model of the empire. When Qin Chu heard the news, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. At that time, he also wanted to borrow Lin Sun's bow and arrows, but Lin Sun refused without hesitation at that time. How the hell was this wholeheartedly for the public? How could he be righteous and the model of the empire? Bah! Could he afford it? The more Qin Chu thought about it, the more depressed he became. especially when he thought that he failed to borrow Lin Sun's bow and was set up by Zhao Xingye. He became more and more aggrieved. However, no matter how angry he was, Lin Sun's name was absolutely like the sun at noon in the imperial camp today, and he was highly respected and praised by countless practitioners. On the contrary, Qin Chu was scolded behind his back and had a bad reputation because someone leaked the news that he had borrowed Lin Sun's bow by force. This made Qin Chu so angry that he wanted to kill all those who criticized and satirized him behind his back. On the night of the return to Camp 7. Chapter 749. After my perception and exploration these days, the origin of this insignificant spiritual bow should be extremely complicated. Although I can't know who made it, I can be sure that this bow has killed a real sage. Zhao Xingye soon gave an answer. Heavenly voice I, however, this answer shocked Lin Sun. He had killed a real sage. This was simply too shocking. In Lin Sun's impression, the sage was almost invincible. He could pick the stars and the moon, travel around the world, live as long as the ancient times, and shine as bright as the sun and the moon. But now it was said that the insignificant spiritual bow had killed a sage. How shocking was that? Even Zhao Xingye, who had already confirmed this, had a slightly strange expression on his face at this moment. This result was indeed too shocking. Even she could not imagine how this bow could have such a bloody and dazzling past. Killing a sage. Just this point alone was enough to shock the world. What made Zhao Xingye feel most incredible was that this bow had killed more than one sage. This bow has been stained with the blood of sages and obliterated the souls of sages. In ancient times, it could be regarded as a peerless murderous weapon. But now it has been seriously damaged. There is too much fierceness and blood in it. Sooner or later, it will burst out completely. Zhao Xingye looked dignified and looked at Lin Sun. Once this happens with your current strength, you are destined to suffer from the backlash, and the consequences are destined to be unbearable. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. He had never expected that there was such a hidden danger in the insignificant spiritual bow before. Backlash. He couldn't help but ask, how terrible is it? Zhao Xingye glanced at Lin Sun with a pair of beautiful eyes and said casually, when I killed Jin Chaos Wei, the king of golden barbarians, a strand of dormant fierceness in this bow accidentally overflowed. It was just a strand, but it impacted my soul and almost took away my will. When I killed King Yen of fire barbarians, a remnant resentment of a sage rushed out of the bow, which almost made my chi collapse. When Zhao Xingye spoke up to this point, a rare trace of fear and terror appeared on his face. At that time, if I didn't possess a secret treasure that guarded the soul, my soul would definitely have been destroyed by the bow when I killed Flame Sky King and died on the spot. Although his words were plain, Lin Sun was stiff all over and gasped. Zhao Xingye was absolutely a top-rate existence in the King realm, yet even she had suffered the backlash of the insignificant spirit bow twice in succession. Moreover, each time was more dangerous than the last, and it was even to the extent that she'd almost lost her life. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the fierce aura contained within the insignificant spiritual bow was. However, you don't have to be too worried. The stronger your cultivation is, the greater the backlash you will suffer when using this bow. Since you haven't encountered the problem of backlash until now, it proves that the insignificant spiritual bow can't hurt you at the moment. Zhao Xingye seemed to have guessed Lin's concern and said, however, the higher your cultivation is in the future, the more you need to pay attention to this problem. After all, it is a potential threat after all. Unless... Lin Sun asked, unless what? Unless you can find the lost weapon spirit of this bow. Weapon spirit? That's right. For such a peerless treasure, from the moment it was born, it would definitely awaken its own spirit. This is just like a human body possessing a soul. Zhao Xingye's beautiful eyes were shining with the luster of wisdom. Such a treasure is also called a psychic holy treasure. because only a saint who has mastered the law of Holy Way can forge such a treasure. Weapon spirit. Psychic holy treasure, Lin Sun murmured thoughtfully. I suggest that if you go to the ancient wilderness to cultivate in the future, you should go to the mysterious holy hidden land, Sunset Valley, if you have a chance. Zhao Xingye suddenly gave a suggestion. Lin Sun was very unfamiliar with the term holy hidden land, so he didn't feel anything. But when he heard the words Sunset Valley, he was stunned at once. He remembered that when he was in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, when he was promoted to the middle level of Tao insight, he triggered the vision of flowers blooming on the other shore. That magnificent vision could be said to be the greatest beauty in the world. But the old toad was disdainful towards this. It once said that there was a holy land in the ancient times called Sunset Valley, and there was a suncrow that had transformed into a sun that resided there all year long while emitting dazzling divine lights that were sufficient to illuminate the heavens. That sort of scene could be called a wonder of the heavens and the earth, a divine beauty of creation. At that time, Lin Sun still had doubts and thought that the old toad was bragging again. But now when he heard the name, Sunset Valley, from Zhao Xingye again, Lin Sun realized that the so-called holy place in ancient times actually existed. Do you still remember the vision when you used this bow? The sun fell from the sky and the golden crow cried blood in the blue sea. I'm sure that this bow has killed the sages of the golden crow. Zhao Xingye analyzed. If you want to know where the spirit of this bow is, Sunset Valley is undoubtedly the most worthwhile place to go. It used to be the nest of the golden crow in ancient times. Even now, there are still many unsolved mysteries in it. Lin Sun nodded seriously and remembered it firmly. If you can find the spirit, you can not only suppress the inherent fierceness of this bow, but also restore some of its former power. Zhao Xingye's slender white fingers stroked the insignificant spiritual bow. The body of the bow was made of white skulls. It was unusually ferocious, but it did not make people's hearts palpitate. Instead, it gave people a sense of holiness. Zhao Xingye couldn't help but sigh. Look at these white skulls. I suspect that this bow is made of the skulls of the sages. This speculation scared Lin Sun. The skulls of the sages. There were 18 white skulls on this bow. If Zhao Xingye's speculation was true, didn't it mean that the skulls of 18 sages were used to build this bow? This was too shocking. Next, Zhao Xingye carefully returned the insignificant spiritual bow to Lin Sun, and then took out the sky arrow and said, "As for this arrow, I recognize it. It's one of the 9 arrows of the ancient Dei tribe. These 9 arrows are named Sky Arrow, Netherworld Arrow, Shangxia Arrow, Moly Arrow, Crooked Tooth, Lucky Light, Pianyu Arrow, Soulful Arrow and Indestructible. Every single arrow has its own profundity and possesses an unimaginably terrifying divine might. As is known to the world, the clansmen of the ancient Dei tribe were all excellent archers. They had an extremely glorious past and were famous in ancient times. Since these 9 arrows could become the most precious treasures of the tribe, their origin is naturally not simple. It's a pity that Sky Arrow and Netherworld Arrow are a pair of complementary twin arrows. They can be used together with the soul-drawing bow to exert the greatest power. When he heard this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Originally, he thought that since there was a certain echo and connection between the insignificant spiritual bow and the sky arrow, they must complement each other. But he never thought that the truth was like this. I see. Lin Sun realized that he had thought too much before. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? When he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield with the insignificant spiritual bow, he suddenly found an arrow that complemented it. Obviously, it was not so simple. However, the insignificant spiritual bow should be stronger than the soul-drawing bow. Otherwise, even if the sky arrow has been seriously damaged, it would not be so easy to subdue it. Zhao Xingye was worthy of being an outstanding king-level existence. With only a few words, she deduced many things that Lin Sun didn't know. Lin Sun couldn't help but be convinced. Remember, when you enter the ancient wilderness in the future, don't use the insignificant spiritual bow unless it is a critical moment. There are too many masters there. Once the magic of the bow is discovered, it is bound to bring you endless trouble. Late at night, when Lin Sun was about to leave, Zhao Xingye reminded him again, which made Lin Sun awestruck. As the saying went, a man's wealth arouses suspicion. Lin Sun naturally understood this truth. As the voodoo barbarian camp quieted down and carried out the truce, the Empire camp was much more relaxed in the following days. In the number 7 camp, no matter who it was, no one was willing to go out rashly if there was no urgent matter. Since the truce had been set, and the supplies were tight, there was not much left. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible to take the initiative to make trouble. This rare quiet and peaceful atmosphere made Lin Sun slightly uncomfortable. However, he was not idle. In addition to practicing martial arts diligently every day, he went to the ordnance office to help some practitioners refine or repair weapons. Occasionally, when he was free, he would find Lu Wenting, Bai, Yen Feng and other friends to drink and party. But every time, Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of Huang and Hu Tong, who had passed away, and inevitably felt a little depressed. The days were very dull. Sometimes, Lin Sun was so bored that he left the camp alone and wandered in the bloodthirsty battlefield. This world was always gloomy, dangerous, and desolate. Even though there were no more enemies on the battlefield, there were still many natural disasters and dangers lurking in it. However, Lin Sun had already been familiar with everything here, so he was not as nervous and scared as he was when he came here for the first time. Several times, when he passed by the mulberry forest, Lin Sun couldn't help but stop and look at it from a distance. He would think of the magnificent sacred tree of ice and snow and the golden cicada with the vision of wishing all creatures in the world could become saints. He would also think of the blood-colored moth with a clear and gentle voice and an awe-inspiring aura, as well as the white cicada with a clear chirp that shook the 9 heavens. Right, there was also the huge cyan flood dragon that Tsing Jinghong caught a glimpse of, which was also a horrible creature that had set foot on the holy path. There was also the mysterious palace that appeared in the world. It stood between heaven and earth, and there were 9,999 steps, just like a ladder to heaven. It once emitted a holy light that illuminated the sky, and dyed the world with a layer of magnificent sacred aura. The vision was boundless. What exactly was hidden in such a mysterious and unknown Taoist palace? Why did it attract so many creatures of the holy path, and why did it not hesitate to burst into fierce bloody conflicts? Lin Sun didn't know that the mulberry forest was completely different from before. It was completely covered by a thick bloody mist, and he couldn't see his fingers in front of him. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun didn't dare to cross the line at all. But Lin Sun was sure that perhaps when the disaster of the Great Path came, those horrible creatures lurking in the mulberry forest would not be willing to be lonely and would come out of nowhere. Time flew like an arrow and time flew like a shuttle. Unknowingly, the time to open the passage to the Empire had come quietly.